Jen, there's a correction to the minutes that I'm going to offer when we consider the minutes.
Okay.
Just FYI.
So an FYI on old business, the resuming in person. We're going to chat about that, but I was just going to read some of the information that I got from Ken just to start us off, and then we can have a discussion about it, okay?
Sounds
Great.
good.
Thanks.
Sounds good.
And you'll all be excited to see. Well, you'll just have to wait. It's a little bit of a surprise when we get to item 2. Now you're all anxiously anticipating the Pledge of Allegiance.
Exciting.
I know. All right, Tristan, is everyone who's in the waiting room here?
Yes.
Great. And all school committee members are here. Great. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the August 26, 2020 school committee meeting. Mrs. Dixie, all school committee members are here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Did you like it? What do you think? Some smiles? Thanks. Excellent. All right. Moving right along. We have item 3, approval of items by consensus. We have approval of minutes, August 12th, 2020. Is there a motion? Mr. Ragsdale, seconded by Mrs. Burns. Discussion.
There's one correction. There's one correction that we need to make to the minutes, which is that at the very beginning, it lists Mr. Fennelly as present, not in the roll call, but it states that he was present at the last meeting. So it just has to be taken out there.
Thank you. I'll make that change.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes with that change?
Hi.
Everyone could mute. I'm not sure what I'm hearing, some feedback. And I can't quite see if everyone is approving the minutes, school committee members.
I would abstain since I wasn't here.
Fine. So that is 2 abstentions. Thank you. Next, we have warrants G401, R203, L03, L04, FS01, 02, and 03. Thank you, Mrs. Newhouse, seconded by Mr. Fennelly. All in favor? Sorry, I'm just not seeing Steve. You can put your hands down. I'm sorry. I'm just waiting. If you are not a school committee member or on the leadership team, if you could just take your video off, that would be helpful. Thank you. All right, so I'm not sure if Steve did he lose the connection again?
I did. I just let him back in.
Okay.
We were
waiting for you. Okay, so again, we have a first, a second. If you approve the minutes from August 12th with that edit, please, let me see a show of hands.
Are we on the warrants? Didn't we already do this?
I'm sorry. Yeah, we are on the warrants. All right, I'm going to read them again. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit. Everybody can turn anyone who's not a school committee member or on the leadership team, if you could turn your video off. And then Tristan, can you make sure everybody other than school committee members are muted? That would be helpful.
Yep, everybody, I've been working my way through the list.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, there's a lot going on here. All right, G401, R203, L03, L04, FS01, 02, 03. Let's start all over again. Thank you, Mrs. Newhouse, seconded by Mr. Fennelly. All in favor of approving those warrants? Steve, can you hear me? All right, he's not getting audio, but it's not unanimous, so I'm just gonna, but it's approved. We have We have enough to approve. All right, Steve, we'll keep working on it. I'm not sure, Mr. Lord, if you can assist. We have warrant CF02. Is there a motion? Mr. Fennelly, seconded by Mr. Samaha. All in favor? That is everyone except for Mr. Bjork. He still is not on audio. That is approved. And warrants payroll ending 8/12/2020 and 8/26/2020. Is there a motion? Thank you, Mrs. Newhouse, seconded by Mr. Samaha. All in favor? All right, same as before. So I'm just going to stop here and see if we can provide some assistance to Mr. Bjork in the audio. Mr. Lord, are you there?
Yes, I'm going to text him, but he can't hear us, so.
Thank you. All right, Wilmington, just hold on for just a few minutes. We're just going to make sure that member Steve Bjork can hear what's going on. I'm just having a couple of technical difficulties with one of our committee members' audio, so we're just gonna try and figure that out before we continue with the agenda. So please just thank you for your patience. All right, Dr. Brand, I'll move us to the superintendent's report. There's just one item under there.
Correct. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. There is one item just under the superintendent's report, update on Wilmington Middle School interim assistant principal. I'll be back to in a moment to provide more around obviously school reopening planning, but in the packet under item 4A, you will note, and members of the community will note, there's a letter that I recently sent out to the school community, middle school community specifically, and staff, just in terms of an update on the leadership situation at the school. Mr. Alexander Phillips, principal of the middle school, continues to be on a leave of absence, and as folks know, Dr. Jeanette Quirk, previously the assistant principal at the school, has been serving in the role of interim. That arrangement continues indefinitely at this point in time, and so that's the first thing that I wanted to share. And then the second thing is that in an effort to provide support for Mr. Faircloth and Dr. Quirk, we recently set out to search for an interim assistant principal. This was an internal search, and as noted in the memo, Mr. Brian Kyra, a fairly long time educator at the school, through the search process emerged and has kindly agreed to step in to help support that team and, more importantly, that school community. And so I just wanted to make sure that the school committee and our larger Wilmington community was aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brand. Mr. Lord, any update on the audio?
We're still working on his audio.
Okay. So I think that committee, what do you
Jen, can Steve connect through his phone to?
Well, I think that he's trying to work out a few different things. I also offered he could call me and I could put him on speaker, but I'd like to not have the discussion just yet about the in-person meetings. And so does it make sense for us to start with the public comment, Mr. Ragsdale?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Why don't we move on to public comment while
Good.
we're working on Steve's audio.
Perfect. I'll pass that over to you.
Okay, so we have a fair amount of public comment tonight, but most of it is written. So we have only a few people who indicated that they were going to be at the meeting to make their comment in person, but we will begin there. So, and pardon any mispronunciations of your names as we go through this. We will do the best we can.
David,
So
can I interrupt? I'm sorry.
Sure, Tristan.
So both Miss Angela Zaykovskaya and Bodhi Tran are not on the call, but Leslie Quick is.
All right, then.
Sorry, Zaykovskaya is here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, then first off, we will have Ms. Angela Zaykovskaya, 6 Summer Street. Please give your comment.
I have a few questions, actually. Question number 1. The parents, like I am myself, a single parent, how do you deal with single parents that can't leave their child at home all day, that have to go to work? Are we supposed to quit our jobs and stay home?
Он онлайн школы. Скажи, для чего? Ты не дочитаешь.
I'm sorry, I should clarify. I'm going to jump in here that the public comment period is, I mean, you can obviously ask questions, but this is not a time for Q&A that the school committee responds to. So if you specifically have questions, we encourage people to use the WPS reopening email address, wpsreopening@wpsk12.com. But you may make any comment you wish, but the committee, this is a chance for the public to have their say, but we do not directly respond to questions during public comment. So please continue.
My biggest concern is the mask. Sending kids with masks, wearing masks all day long. It's still hot outside. It's not good for their immune system. They're compromising immune system with wearing a mask all day. I don't think that that's the right thing to do for children. Kids have been out of school since February. They've gotten together. They've hung out together. I don't see a reason for a child to wear a mask all day.
It's harming.
It's harming them, actually. That's my biggest concern.
All right, thank you very much for that comment. Next, we have Leslie Quick, 723 Woburn Street.
Что ты ЭБМ и все. Ясно.
Leslie, are you there? I thought I saw her on the call earlier. Tristan, do you have her still listed?
Not seeing her, Mr. Ragsdale, but can we go to the next one, then we'll come back? Does that make sense?
Sure, sure, we can come back. Let me, if someone could keep an eye and let me know if she comes back on the call, and then I'll come back to her.
Sounds good. I'll let you know. Thank you.
All right. So we're now going to get to the written comments. There are a fair number of them, so you know, everyone, we'll have some patience. We are going to trade off some of the reading of these, so I will do the first 10 or so, and then some different school committee members will take over, so that you don't only have to hear my voice for a long time. So beginning with Joe Maella, writes, I strongly believe that athletics are an important key in the social and emotional development of our student athletes. They are a very important piece of the overall education of our students. I believe it is safe for the sports approved by DESE to take place this fall. I know that some districts and leagues are now delaying their fall sports season to the new time frame for the fall 2 season, which is from late February to late April. As someone with knowledge and experience of when our grass fields will be ready in the spring, it would be highly unlikely that any grass field would be ready until early April, best case scenario, which would mean there would be very limited space for teams to practice and play games. If fall sports are moved to the fall 2 timeframe, there's just no way that subvarsity and varsity football, boys and girls soccer, and field hockey teams will have access to field space, and most of our kids would not have an opportunity to participate. Because of this, I am hopeful that our district would allow the fall sports approved by EEA and DESE to happen in September. Next is Natalie Mendonca, 126 Marion Street. I have some real concerns about the remote option, Cohort C. In all the meetings and presentations, there is still no clarity that would alleviate the community's reservations. This group needs to receive an equal education to the hybrid groups. Not enough attention is being paid to this option of learning. Then Megan Kozlik for 10 Hanover Street. Offering 2.5 hours of kindergarten a day with no aftercare option puts working parents in an impossible position and is a step backwards for those of us who successfully returned our children to childcare this summer. While 6-foot spacing may be the ideal, 3-foot spacing with masks and minimal mixing seems a realistic and sufficiently cautious option, and in many ways seems better than what will otherwise happen, which is kids mixing through larger groups of people when parents need to arrange for additional caregivers or to register their children for some of the other group care options that are springing up. Next, a comment from Brittany Joyce, 5 Douglas Ave. Hello, I'm looking to understand what the plan is to get another half day or full day added to the different cohorts. Like 0 cases for 2 weeks, we add a half day, etc. Also, how long are we supposed to plan to be in this makeshift schedule? Also, what is the plan for when a positive case is confirmed within the district? It doesn't make sense to close down an entire district, just like whole businesses don't get shut down. Additionally, I wanted to know, with Cohort A going Monday, Thursday, what is going to happen to their schedule when many of the holidays fall on Mondays? And finally, since our kids are not able to attend full in-person school, should February and April vacations be foregone this year to make up some much needed and deserved classroom time? Thank you. Next, a comment from Deborah Morse, 6211 Avalon Drive. Are the schools in the state going to put plexiglass shields around the desks, including the teachers, before school starts or by mid-October? Next, a comment by Michael Luongo, 21 Beach Street. My children have suffered greatly since schools have closed. The long-term effects will be undoubtedly detrimental and incalculable. Viruses have long plagued human existence. This virus has inexplicably completely altered life. Massachusetts statistics show the average age of hospitalization is 54. I understand the initial panic, but 6 months later, data shows that this is not as scary as originally thought. Sadly, this debate has now become political and legal. Just let kids go to school. I'm disappointed to see the battles brewing between schools and teachers' unions. We are approaching the day school would normally open, and now we are hearing a phased-in opening at a later date to be determined. I'm fearful the date will never come and my children will suffer more. Next is Kate DeBrio, 5 King Street. Many parents, in particular essential workers and teachers, will be sending students to daycare facilities on their remote days in order to work. In those situations, one-on-one monitoring of students' remote learning will be difficult, and I sincerely hope that will be taken into consideration. Assignment-based remote days, rather than strict appointment-based schedules, are much better for working parents and daycare providers with many different learning situations, different classes, teachers, even districts to juggle. And Lizette Packer, 34 Burlington Ave. Says, good evening, Dr. Brand and school committee members. I would like to thank everyone in the WPS system that has spent their summer working so hard to get our kids back in the schools this fall. Your tremendous efforts are appreciated. I am honored to have been part of the reopening committee, where I saw firsthand the professionalism and dedication our teachers and administrators hold. They have worked tirelessly to make the best out of this upcoming school year. I want to express my support of Dr. Brand's phase-in hybrid plan. However, I do hope that we can hold true to having full hybrid by September 28th. The risks of children not going back to schools outweigh the benefits. Their mental health is at stake. Delaying in-person learning will be doing a disservice to many children in our district that do not have the support at home to succeed with remote learning. By now, we have all chosen remote or hybrid for our individual families. In speaking to other parents, I've learned that there seems to be a feeling among parents that choosing remote is choosing an inferior education. When we choose remote versus hybrid, I didn't think we were trying to choose the better education. I took it as a health issue. I think that we all have enough trust in our school system to know that they would not present an inferior option. I hope that we can each individually choose what is best for our own families and respect the decisions of others, even if it is not what you are doing. I ask that we do not let the parents that chose the remote plan influence your decision to further delay the start of in-person learning. Unfortunately, every child's education will be compromised to some degree this year, but that is no fault of WPS. This is due to the state of the world. We need to come together and help our teachers and help each other in order to help our children. This school year will only be successful if we stay positive and work together. Parents, please reach out to the schools, ask what you can do to help, donate cleaning supplies, donate your time, and support each other. Thank you for your time. And before passing the baton, I just want to see if Leslie Quick is on the call to make her comment yet.
She has not joined yet.
Okay, then I think, Joe, are you taking it from here?
Yes.
All right.
Stacy King, 8 Houghton Road. Has there been any progress made on evaluating the air quality HVAC systems in the schools? If not, when is that expected to be completed by? Does the town know where it stands yet on what changes will need to be made? Does the town know the cost of those changes or the expected time frame of completion? Catherine Wills, 8 Serenade Lane. Good evening. Thank you for reading my question. It is regarding students in cohort C and what happens to them if the district ends up going fully remote, either at the start of school or at some other point after the start of school. The parents of the students in cohort C want their child taught fully remote, and if the district at any point is fully remote, the parents of cohort C should be allowed to choose if their child can join their classmates and receive the benefits of a full schedule taught completely by the Wilmington teachers under the district's fully remote plan. Will this be an option for cohort C students if the district goes fully remote at any time? Again, thank you. Pat Nally, 3 Pineview Road. I write to let Dr. Brand know that more people in community stand behind his and the reopening committee's plan than they realize. Dr. Brand has a good plan that I hope evolves into a full in-person plan over time. There'll be lots of final details to evolve, change, or adjust. I am confident with Dr. Brand at the helm to finalize the plan. Most importantly, there will be a tough negotiation ahead with the union. Stand by your convictions and do what you think is best for the majority of students in Wilmington. The quiet majority of the population will be standing behind you when the fight comes at the negotiation table in the very likely event of a sign holding campaign in front of the school. Carrie St. Ange, 4 Hopkins Street. When will teacher in-house for middle school selections be announced, as well as supplies? Do you have any idea what the day will look like for kids virtually and hybrid? Also, what support services are you planning for children with IEPs? Melissa Du Bois, 342 Chestnut Street. Good evening. As a parent of 3 children in the Wilmington Public Schools and a special education teacher in the neighboring town of Reading, I felt it was important to give my input on the opening of school. Living and working in towns that are in the white level, I feel that every effort should be made to get our children back to school in person. As an educator and a parent, I saw the detrimental effects that spring remote learning had on our children. The time is for creative thinking and solutions, not negativity and fear mongering. Maybe students in grades 1 through 12 will not be able to be back right away. Maybe we start with 1 through 3 and continue to phase in. Maybe we use all of our school buildings creatively if some are in better conditions than others. Maybe we use all of the outdoor spaces we have in town to the best of our abilities. Parents and community members will band together to support the schools in whatever they need. Our goal has to be to get our kids back in person. A computer can never replace a teacher. In a few short weeks, I will be in person, ready to teach my students every day without hesitation. I want the same for the children in Wilmington Public Schools. Sincerely, Melissa Du Bois. Eric Packer, 34 Burlington Ave. Hi, Dr. Brand. I am writing to you as part of the silent majority to back your hybrid plan for the start of the coming school year. All we seem to hear about is the opposition to your hybrid plan, most vocal being the teachers union, and this is not how the majority feel. You need to do what is best for the majority of the students, and that is to get them back into school. We cannot continue to disregard the mental health of students. I've watched the mental health of my own children deteriorate over the last 6 months. It's crazy that we completely disregard this aspect when we're talking about a demographic that is virtually untouched by this virus. Resist the continued fear mongering and get them back into class. The silent majority will be behind you, and I'll do what I can to make sure we stay silent no longer. I don't envy your position, and please know that I personally appreciate all the hours, which I'm sure I even underestimate, that you have put into getting these kids back to face learning. Thanks, Eric Packer, father of 9th and 11th grader. Tina Chirichiello, 22 Linda Road. These children need normal life to come back. They need to be in school learning and participating in extracurricular activities. Melissa Erickson, 27 Mill Road. My comment that I want to be heard is that these kids need to go back to school, even if it is in a hybrid model. Their mental health is at stake here, and these kids are struggling at learning from home. I have one child on a light IEP and one child that is not. Despite this, the face-to-face integration is needed for them to make connections with their teachers and classmates. The HVAC system has been the same as it has been. If needed, upgrade the filters and get the classrooms ready for back to school in-person learning. If we need to purchase desk shields, let's do this. If everyone can go back into public, go on vacation, go to restaurants, shopping and casinos, they can go back to school. My kids go to work, play sports, dance, and they'll do it all with the mask with no complaints. We can do this. The kids need it. That is what is important here. Julie LeBlanc, 46 Lawrence Street. I fully support hybrid model. Maria Gambali, 96 Mink Run Road. I have two sons that are both on IEPs. One will be entering into his junior year of high school, and the other will be entering into 8th grade this year. Both of my sons have ADHD and depend on the structure of their IEP plans and the help the Learning Center provides them. Remote learning has proved to be an ineffective method given my son's disabilities. They both have a hard time with organization, following along with directions, staying on track with their assignments, and are unable to focus and stay still for long periods of time. Both of my children were beginning to excel in school with the help and safeguards put into place with their IEPs. Over the spring, I saw a complete reversal of all of the progress they had been making in school. Both of my boys were frustrated to the point of tears and literally gave up in some classes. Both my husband and I are full-time workers, and we're not able to work from home and will not be able to work from home this coming school year. That left both of my sons without an adult to help guide them through remote learning during the day. I filled out the survey and chose the hybrid model for my boys. However, I was hoping to have them in the classroom more than the recommended 2 days per week. I viewed the superintendent's video reopening plan, and there was mention of children on an IEP being eligible for additional days of in-classroom learning. I would hope that both of my children would qualify under their IEP for this additional in-person instruction, as it is dire to their education, mental and physical well-being. Last school year was my older son's first year on an IEP. He was not diagnosed with ADHD until recently. We saw his confidence soar and grades finally begin to improve with the help of his IEP. All that changed when we went to remote learning in the spring. He hasn't even gotten a full year in school with an IEP yet. With him going into such an important school year, junior year, it is so important to give him the help he needs to succeed. My younger son has been on an IEP for several years and went from a student on the verge of failing to a straight A student with the help of his IEP. I was devastated watching him decline this past spring during remote learning. Both his confidence level and pride in his work were destroyed due to this level of frustration with his disability. If there's any way possible to have both of my children in the classroom face-to-face learning, it would be a tremendous help to our family. Thank you for your time and hard work during these difficult times. It is greatly appreciated. Who's up next? '21.
Oh, okay. There we go. I wasn't able to unmute myself. Okay. 21. Okay. Jennifer Recupero, 25 Apache Way. I wanted to voice that I am strongly in favor of the kids going back with a hybrid model. Matthew Savage, 55 Garden Ave. Hello. I urge a return to school for all students, at least in the hybrid model. The rates of infection in Wilmington continue to be extremely low, and until there is a marked increase, we should follow the data and allow children to return to school. My oldest son is a senior this year, and after the events of last year, including the canceling of spring sports, junior prom, etc., I wish for him to have much of the normal learning and senior experience as possible. I know there are health concerns, but as long as protocols are followed and rates remain low, there is no need to keep kids home. I don't believe the remote learning model is as effective as in-person, and many others agree. My younger children lost out on educational development last year, and I feel they'll fall even further behind this year. I've heard of tutors and learning pods being sought by parents. Is this fair to those who can't afford or don't have that option? Is there a reason to pivot from in-person learning? If there is a reason to pivot from in-person learning, I understand. But in the meantime, if following guidelines, we must get kids back to school. Kelly Murphy, 50 Houghton Road. Unfortunately, I am unable to attend the meeting tonight, but did want to comment on our family's strong desire to have the hybrid model approved for the beginning of the FY 2021 school year. I believe the kids have completely been forgotten about in all of this, and they will end up suffering the long-term ramifications that come as a result of the pandemic. They absolutely need some return to normalcy, which if done safely, I believe attending school a few days a week would get them back to. Chuck Stokes, 5 Jacob Street. Dr. Brandt, I write to express my support of your reopening plan for the upcoming school year. I have 3 children currently in the Wilmington school system. They are all ready and excited to return to school. The hybrid model, to me, makes the most sense. Ultimately, I would like to see the children back to school full-time, but I do understand the hybrid step as a cautionary measure. The recent surveys suggest that the vast majority of parents feel that getting the children back to school is safe and in the best interest of their long-term academic and mental wellness. The current data and science confirms the same. As I'm sure you are aware, in Massachusetts, there are currently 0 deaths of children between the ages of 1 to 19 years old. The odds of an otherwise healthy adult with no underlying medical conditions between the ages of 20 and 60 to succumb to this virus is approximately 0.015%. The governor is also on record as saying that based on the data, schools should be reopened. There is no good reason to even consider remote learning as a gradual process. It is my understanding that there is a vocal minority trying to curtail the community from moving forward, citing that it's not safe to return. Based on all the data available, their argument contradicts the facts. Again, please understand there is a strong silent majority that feels as I do. Thank you, Dr. Brandt, for having the best interests of our children at heart. Regards, Chuck Stokes. Tanya Curry, 12 Cherokee Lane. Please give clarification on the plan for those children in Cohort C. There has been little to no guidance on what full remote learners should expect. I am extremely concerned about the chances that my child will be learning through a third-party program that does not align with the WPS curriculum. This would make it very difficult for the children to integrate into the hybrid setting or vice versa when this becomes an option. I feel that it could potentially put them at a disadvantage when starting school again the following year if they have learned things differently than their peers who were hybrid for the school year. Also, how will being full remote affect the children with IEPs, especially if they're being taught through a third-party program? The lack of communication as to what we can expect as full remote is concerning and makes it difficult to do even the slightest amount of preparation. It seems as though Cohort C is being tossed to the side and forgotten about. Christy Rind, 96 Burlington Ave. I'm highly in favor of a hybrid model, especially for students with IEPs. which is not my child, but I can only imagine how difficult remote learning will be for students with special needs. I'm also hoping if remote learning is the start, there will be an opportunity for kids and teachers to at least meet face to face sooner rather than later. Mark Galucci, 60 Agostino Drive. Hello. While I'm in favor of a 100% return to in-school learning, if the short-term option is between hybrid and full remote, then I would be in strong favor of your hybrid plan. In fact, the survey you sent out last month showed that close to 70% of Wilmington agrees with sending kids back to school, back to some form of in-person learning. I would, however, be strongly against a long phased-in approach. Anything more than a week or two would be far too long. We are 5 months into the pandemic, and the infection rate in Massachusetts are going down. The Massachusetts hospitalization rate and the death rates continue to be low. Wilmington has had some of the lowest infection rates in the state for months now. Even Governor Baker himself said towns like Wilmington that are doing this well should go back to in-person learning. The school system owes the children of this community the best education they can get, and that cannot be achieved in a fully remote model. I witnessed firsthand how excellent students with consistent track records of making honor roll are not adapting to the remote world. I certainly understand why people who have underlying conditions or live with the elderly are nervous to return to in-person learning. You have built a remote option for people who have these concerns, and they can make that choice if they feel it will keep them and their families safe. The rest of the community should also be able to make what they feel is the best choice for their families. Thank you. Minaj Jaffer, 39 Hathaway Road. How will students on 504 get extra help? Can we choose the complete online option and bring our student as needed, or do we need to choose the hybrid option? Keith Erickson, 27 Mill Road. I strongly support a full in-person or hybrid learning model. Wilmington is a low-risk community per Governor Baker's recently communicated state map. Further, when we speak of risk, let us please begin to speak of the risk of children not being fully educated through in-person learning and how that will impact both their short and long-term success. If other local public and private schools can go back to in-person learning, why not Wilmington Public? If we are able to shop at the local stores and eat at local restaurants in person, why not in-person education? Remember, we are not living in a completely locked down society. People are coming, going, and gathering as they please. When I hear individuals state that we should only reopen schools to in-person learning when it is safe, I would kindly request that person to define safe. If safe is defined as 0% risk, then that is simply unrealistic. We live with risk every day and always will. So if you are risk adverse, it is your personal decision to stay at home and or homeschool. For all others, however, there should be an opportunity to benefit from in-person learning while accepting any perceived or real risks. To close, there is no substitute for in-person learning. Let us acknowledge the low risk of COVID, but high risk of children falling further behind academically and socially without some level of in-person education. Thank you for the opportunity to submit my comment for consideration. And then I think that's Jesse, are you up next?
Yep, that's me. Thanks. It's Niam Dwyer, 6 Chisholm Way. For remote learning, what are the expectations for the teachers to ensure the learning system is improved over what the students received earlier this year? Have we considered doing what a lot of the private schools are doing? Teachers in classroom and Zoom in. To the kids that way, we are guaranteed the structure is there. A lot of parents are definitely concerned about remote learning because they are comparing it to what we experienced March through June. Will there be a format for feedback? And I certainly know you won't make everyone happy. Ultimately, it's what is the best format for the kids to learn. I have a 7th grader and a junior, and I am very concerned for my junior. Huge year for him. Ursula Tasto, 140 Chestnut Street. First of all, I want to thank all of the Wilmington Public Schools staff and this committee for the tremendous amount of work you are all doing in this unprecedented year. Your work toward putting in place appropriate plans to keep everyone safe and educate our children is appreciated. There are a few things that I would like you to consider. The first is that the return to hybrid brings different challenges for each grade and school. At the last school committee meeting, it was obvious that changing classrooms in the high school between periods will bring extra challenges. This problem does not exist in lower grades. Please consider each school separately and aim to start the hybrid approach as early as possible by school. This could allow best practices to be shared from school to school. I cannot imagine how challenging scheduling and logistics planning must be from the district perspective. I do know that planning for support at home to complement in-school efforts is nearly impossible without visibility to in-school schedules. I encourage sharing as much information as early as possible regarding cohorts or updates on the ability to safely return to in-school education. Lastly, how might parents and community members have visibility to the mechanisms by which our district will continually learn and adjust our approach to have the best education system in the area, whether through regular surveys of staff, students, and parents, or through other feedback channels? Please proactively put in place mechanisms to constantly improve our approach. It would also be helpful to share the agreements that are established with teachers to know where limitations or opportunities exist. Thank you again for your time and efforts to make this academic year successful. And finally, Christian Hoffman, 27 Forest Street. Committee members, I have no doubt that many of you wrestled with the decision on the makeup of school reopening, yet I am astonished that the collective opinion of a clear majority, 68.24%, of community members was ignored when deciding to start the school year in a remote setting. This is a misguided attempt to protect a demographic that is little affected by the virus and serves only to embolden various special interest groups pushing for a full remote setting. I have very little faith in a phased-in reopening plan, and am curious as to what specific metric is being targeted in order to achieve in-person learning. Without clearly articulating this measure, you are in danger of squandering an entire school year in a remote setting, which would have disproportionate, detrimental consequences to a specific segment of higher needs students. It is disingenuous to believe that an ineffective remote setting environment can fulfill all educational and social needs of children, particularly younger ones. It is also disingenuous going to such great lengths trying to differentiate remote learning from homeschooling, as my experience last spring taught me that they are one and the same. At time of writing, I have yet to see clearly articulated plans for how exactly remote learning will proceed, what it will entail, and how teachers, students will be held accountable for their efforts to ensure WPS maintains its academic standards. Prior to this decision, parents always had a choice for full remote learning in order to keep their children safe, consistent with their own views and circumstances. Your decisions have stripped me of my right to choose the best course of action for the educational and social needs of my children, in stark contrast to the guidance set forth by various governmental bodies better equipped to make these judgments. I fear the inevitable outcome of this ruling will simply lead to develop a less educated, less socially adept student that is at best only equally safe. I am truly ashamed of my children's involvement, as well as my own, in a community that places such little value on academic aptitude, by and large society's best socioeconomic equalizer. The decisions taken by the committee will only serve to broaden the gap between the disadvantaged and intensify inequality further. I urge all members to ignore the campaign of fear shrouding this issue and objectively scrutinize nonpartisan COVID-19 statistics firsthand to gain a better understanding of the actual risks involved. This is the very least you can do, and it is owed to future generations within the community.
All right, and that is our last public comment, except that I did want to mention that although Leslie Quick had signed up and had trouble getting back on the call, that she was intending to make a comment in support of the hybrid learning plan as well.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Jen, back to you.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you, committee members, for sharing the responsibility for reading those out tonight. That was helpful. Thank you to all who submitted. Thank you for your thoughts and for your questions. And before we move on, Dr. Brand, can you just provide us with a quick update as to when the FAQs will be up, and I guess how we're doing with the questions that are rolling in on that reopening email, just so that we have a sense of are we giving answers? It would be helpful, I think, for everyone to hear, especially since there have been so many questions asked tonight.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Bryson. There's, as we come close to finalizing the aspects of this plan, there are some questions, or many questions actually, that have been asked that until we have sort of all four corners, if you will, of the plan finalized, are going to be difficult to respond to. But all of those, a couple of things, two things in particular, that certainly as this plan becomes finalized, our agreements are in place, we will aggressively move to post responses to as many of the questions as we can under the FAQ section of the website. But moreover, I'll take the opportunity to also share with the community the intention that I see would be beneficial is to have a couple of opportunities outside of a formal school committee meeting, but more of an open forum, if you will, to provide the chance for our community's members to tune in, ask questions, and be able to have a more two-way engagement to help our parents and guardians understand the tenets of this plan, what it means, and how it's going to proceed. So we certainly will hold true to our commitment to get as much of those questions and answers posted in short order.
Great. Thank you very much for that update. Let us move back to old business, which is resuming in-person school committee meetings. And this is something we just wanted to talk about and move on. I know that we decided to meet via Zoom tonight because we would have someone traveling who would not be able to attend in person, which is part of the consideration as we move forward. So we did reach out to Mr. Lord, who did reach out to WCTV, as they are instrumental in making sure that these meetings are shared with the community so well and to such a high level. So I just wanted to read through that with you quickly, and then we could just have a discussion about what we think makes the most sense moving forward. So if you held an in-person meeting with no audience, only the public commenters would need, oh, I'm sorry, can you hear me? Sorry, was someone unmuted? We're trying to figure out this mute, unmute, who's controlling it. It's not easy. Thank you, Mrs. Dixie. I know it's complicated. Sorry, I'll start again. If you held an in-person meeting with no audience, only the public commenters would need to be in a Zoom, and everyone else could watch on WCTV or via the live stream on the web or Facebook, YouTube. The meeting feed from WCTV would not be able to be played within the Zoom session. Audio delays and feedback would be an issue if it was streamed into the Zoom. The public commenter would need to watch the meeting on WCTV or via their live stream on the web or Facebook, YouTube. We couldn't have a school committee member in the Zoom to participate. There's an audio delay between the feed from WCTV and Zoom, and streaming the meeting into the Zoom would cause feedback issues. If a school committee member needed to participate remotely with the rest of the committee in person, we'd recommend they dial into a speakerphone. They wouldn't be able to see unless they watched on WCTV, but there is a delay that will make it confusing for that member. And finally, if we assume only the public commenters are in the Zoom, we need to test to make sure WCTV can pick up the audio from the presentation laptop to rebroadcast. So that's some of the information we were able to gain. Mr. Lord, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but if I missed anything or you have anything else to add from your expertise.
Nope, that covers it.
Okay. Mrs. Burns?
Is there a way that maybe like a conference call, like a phone conference call can be done? Or I'm not sure. I haven't thought it out well, but I was thinking about people calling in almost. And I don't know if that was something that WCTV could be able to do. I mean, in lines with our meeting per se. With the radio show.
Sure, Mr. Lord, if you have an answer, that would be great.
Just so the safest way is if you want to have the in-person meeting with just a school committee in person and broadcast on WCTV is for public commenters to call in, and we can arrange some kind of a phone bank that would work in. But if you try to introduce Zoom into that mix, that's where it gets all messy. So that would be a traditional way we could do that.
That would be a great idea. I don't know what others may feel, but at least for people to be able to call in. Call in and engage. I think that's a great idea. I'd be interested what others thought.
Mrs. Newhouse?
Would we still be allowing the public to write in like they have been if they don't want to, if they have trouble with calling in, if we were in person?
I don't see why not. I don't have a definite answer to that, but I don't see why we wouldn't continue that.
Okay.
Anybody else have a thought on that?
I think that I think it sounds like a good idea, and I'd like to continue with people writing in. I think a lot of people might feel a little self-conscious reading or speaking out loud, but they can put their thoughts down on paper. I think those thoughts are important as well.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly go back to the level of engagement we've had since we started. Our Zoom meetings has been higher than anything I've experienced in all of my years on the school committee. So whatever we can keep in place, I think to continue with that engagement. Obviously, there's a lot to say right now as well, but I think whatever we can do to keep the community engaged, I think is helpful. Other thoughts on meeting in person? Mr. Ragsdale.
So if we had the call-in option, I think that would be great. Would we also potentially have a way for people to still attend the meeting in person if they simply wanted to observe or to make a public comment in person? Or would we, think that that's too difficult to arrange?
I think what we've talked a little bit about, and Dr. Brand, feel free to chime in, was that there could be maybe a waiting area and that one person at a time could come in to make a comment in person, but it might be too difficult to open. There's not a space that we have where we can all be spaced out sufficiently and also have visitors, although we did talk about the auditorium at the high school was something we had discussed. But something else that keeps coming up in some of these conversations is the amount of cleaning that needs to be done after bringing so many new people into a space in a building and what that will do to our custodial staff. And so I don't know, Dr. Branner or Mr. Gier, if you have anything to add to that.
I think that's right. There's some complexity in and of itself, thinking about spreading out the members, even within the current room that we use. So that in and of itself is a logistical adjustment that would have to be done. And, well, in typical times or more normal times, perhaps generally speaking, the participation or presence rather of the public is more minimal. Certainly we've seen over the last number of months, understandably, that that's a very different situation. And I think if you were to entertain that, given what we're dealing with to trying to keep the buildings closed to outside folks, that it creates another complication that would have to be certainly managed in a very different way. It's not to say that we couldn't do it, but there would have to be considerable considerations given to how we manage it, and then what it's going to take to prepare schools for opening the next day.
Mrs. Newhouse.
How would we handle presenters, other staff and people that typically come to our meetings to present different materials to us? Would that be handled via Zoom for us to see on like a TV screen, or would they actually need to come in person as well?
My understanding is that doing the Zoom while streaming is going to be quite difficult. So I don't know if it means, we could talk about pre-recording certain things. I mean, I'm sure there's ways around it, but my guess is it would be easiest for them to wait in a waiting area and then come in to do the presentation and then leave right after is my guess. Dr. Brand?
Yeah, I would agree. I think to try and have them remotely handle that would be complicated.
Mr. Smaha?
Is there any consideration just about open meeting laws? If we're not really allowing the public into the actual room? That's just one thought that comes to mind too.
I certainly would have to check this. I can't say this with certainty, but I think that the underlying provision is providing access and opportunity for members of the public to participate. I don't know that there's something specific that speaks to, necessarily in person. But then the secondary thing to consider is that I'm also not certain of this, but would imagine that given the ongoing circumstances, there's certainly been some relaxation of some of the respective laws around open meeting law. And I think that we can check into that ultimately, depending on the direction that you want to go, because I would want to make sure, obviously, as a governing body, you're in line with what the law requires for that. But I think we can check on that depending on your decision here tonight.
I'm almost certain that we're still operating under the executive order that allows us, as long as we provide real-time access through technological means, as we do with WCTV. I'm sure that we're still under that provision.
That's my understanding. Thank you. All right, any other questions or comments? No? So I don't know if this needs a vote, but I guess, do we want to try and do an in-person meeting at our next meeting to see how it goes and then maybe reevaluate? Not sure that would be, that's sort of what I'm thinking. I might like to try. Mrs. Burns?
I'm interested in getting back to face-to-face meeting. I think it's a little easier with, consistent, we don't have to worry about internet connections. But I think the only thing I have no problem, and that's my intent. My only, Dr. Brand did raise some questions that I want to be some points that I want to be mindful of. And so did you, Mrs. Bryson, with regards to what space would we occupy that would be least impactful to the custodial staff to ensure that the schools are ready to operate as they need to be the following day. So that's my only, don't want to get my hopes up, only that would be my interest. I would like that answered if it's at all even possible.
Sure. And I think we can definitely get that answer for you in the next 5 days or so from Dr. Brand. We can figure out a space and where we're going to meet. We'll have to talk with WCTV again and Mr. Lord about how to make sure that it's going to be clean and a good view for people at home. Mr. Ragsdale.
And I think that trying it out, as you suggested, is the best way for us to also learn what the impact is on the custodial service. Like if we do it, and then we'll be in a better position to know what the trade-offs are for continuing to do it that way.
Great. All right. So I guess tentatively, I don't know if you just want to give a show of hands if you think you would be willing to try an in-person meeting at our next meeting. All right, so I'll work with Dr. Brand and Mr. Ragsdale and try and make sure we set that up in a way that works for committee members and WCTV and the public. Sound good? Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. All right, moving right along to the school reopening update. And that's you, Dr. Brand, when you're very prepared.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. There is a fairly extensive, not as extensive as last time, but a fairly extensive, nevertheless, presentation tonight, just to continue to provide members of the community with updates as it relates to a number of different aspects related to our reopening plan. This evening, though, in fact, I'm going to have really not a whole lot to share tonight because we have a number of folks who are part of this overall effort that is complicated and is broad in terms of the number of people involved. And so these specific topics that are going to be outlined tonight just seem very timely as we move closer towards the start of school. And so just a couple of things that I'll begin, and then I'll turn it over to those that are helping in the presentation tonight. We will make sure that this presentation is posted, if it's not already, on our district website. Again, I'll put a plug in for members of the community who I know are trying to follow all of the related information regarding the reopening. And there's a boatload of information, to be sure, but we are doing our very best to keep our website around the reopening updated, with not only with the Department of Education guidance, but also the many presentations and related information that we continue to be relying upon as it relates to this overall plan. So first off, I do want to take this opportunity to point out one difficulty, a challenge that we didn't quite anticipate, unfortunately, and that has to do with the results of the survey, which I'll share with you in just a moment from the family survey. You may recall the last time I presented that one of the key pieces for informing our planning was to gather a clear sense from members of our community around what their intention was around the learning model that they would be pursuing or opting for their children. And unfortunately, we had approximately 400 students. That's right, 400 students for whom parents, guardians indicated both hybrid and remote as their options. And so unfortunately, as you might imagine, what that led to was the need for, I think every single principal was in this case, needing to contact dozens and dozens of families to ascertain what their selection was. And that has slowed down the process. But 400 students, as I'm sure that everyone can appreciate, is substantial, it's considerable. And so we originally were hoping to have the hybrid announcements out this week, but because of that's been an extensive delay. We are going to have to push that off until next week. I'll show you the survey results in a minute. In the background or the foreground or all of the above, the guidance continues to flow from the Department of Education. It's not exactly daily, but it's certainly weekly. And we continue, as all districts are, to do the very best to try and shape and adjust these plans accordingly, certainly where there's a clear intersection with some of the planning that we need to do. That's something that's more than necessarily guidance. Negotiations continue with the WTA, or the Wilmington Teachers Association, and we've been meeting with great regularity, with more meetings to come. But tonight, the specific focus is on a number of areas as outlined on the screen here. And as I mentioned, we are going to have folks who are going to jump in. And for those who are helping tonight, Alice Brown-Legrand, we have Shelley Newhouse, Doreen Crow, Mia Muzio, our new athletic director, transportation, Lisa Ferretta, and George Hooper are all going to take these respective parts of the presentation. And so for those folks that are here presenting, if you could kindly unmute, or at least at the very moment, engage your video so that Ms. Dixie can help monitor you. The next slide here provides an overview of the Family Learning Model Survey. A lot of numbers here, but this snapshot provides an overview of our 8 schools and the respective selections by all of our families. So broken out by school, moving from left to right, the grade, the selection, the selection that a family made for the children, whether it be in-person, hybrid, third column from the left, remote, those that had indicated homeschool, but that's changing by the day, to be quite honest. The total respondents by grade, and then the total enrollment by grade. Generally speaking, I think it would be reasonable to suggest that for at least at the elementary level, as you can see with the 4th column from the left, we have approximately the equivalent of a class of students who have selected remote. At the middle school, hovering around 50 or so at each grade level. At the high school, I think it'd be fair to say that at least Ms. Peters and I expected that number to be actually higher than it is for the number of students who have selected remote. And in fact, I know Ms. Peters can speak more to this. She's not here tonight, I don't think, but in fact, the lower numbers, and I'll speak more to this at the latter part of the presentation, is becoming more difficult to actually work with as it relates to trying to come up with a construct or a framework that might work. I'll say a little bit more about that later, but again, I wanted the members of the committee to have this overarching view of what it is that our principals are working feverishly at to try and figure out. And I'll remind folks, it's not just the simple splitting of this cohort of students into A or B, but underneath that, an effort to align siblings on the same day across the district, and as well, the next topic that intersects with all of this, and that is those students that are being identified as high needs, which become part of the in-person model on a daily basis. So it is a complex picture that principals are working feverishly at to try and figure out. With that, I'll turn over the next section to Ms. Brown-LeGrand, who's here as our Director of Student Support Services.
Good evening, everybody. So we've worked for probably the last couple of weeks going through all of our students' IEPs and IEP documents to kind of line it up with the state expectations for prioritizing remote learning and in-person learning. When the guidance came out, really all the Department of Ed asked was that we take a look at the criteria kind of on the screen and prioritize these students for in-person services. They didn't at any point indicate what that schedule should look like, how many days a week that should occur, but mainly we're concerned that as much as districts are able, that we want to make sure that these students are getting as much time in person as possible. For students on an IEP, the two big criteria are the students that fall within the high needs category, and that is actually a separate form that's part of an administrative form, but it is based upon where they receive services, who they receive the services by, and to what degree outside of the general education environment, to what percentage they receive those services. Once the student is identified, so there's low, moderate, and high needs. Once the student is identified as a high needs student, then the Department of Ed is asking us to look at two of the following three criteria. Are services provided outside of the general education classroom? Are the service providers special ed teachers and related service providers? And then whether the special education services constitute more than 75% of the student's day. So what we as a district really, we spent a lot of time just trying to figure out from a structural point of view, what would work, as well as really trying to take the approach of trying to provide students with as much as possible, particularly our high needs students or complex needs students, as many days as possible in person. So for students that fall into this high needs category and meet two of the three criteria, they will attend 5 days per week on a regular school schedule, with the other students in the building going a hybrid, with everybody being remote on Wednesday. These students will be here 5 days per week. The second category of students we need to look at are those students that fall into kind of the more complex and significant needs, but may not actually have an educational plan, which are the next number of bullets kind of listed below. So looking at students that are unable to engage in remote learning because of their disability, students who also use aided or augmentative communication as a way of supporting their instruction, or even as a basic way of communicating. Students who fall into the homeless foster care category also are identified with complex significant needs, and students who are also identified as English learners. Would you mind, Tristan, go to the next one? What we've been able to come up with is that students that, again, are high needs, whose placement meets the other two of the three criteria, who are in a substantially separate program, attend 5 days per week. Students that have complex or significant needs that fit the other criteria will attend 4 days per week. So this could be a student that has a partial inclusion plan for whom remote learning was not successful in the spring. It could be a student who's identified as ELL, for whom needs more in-person services. And I know the main question is, what is the difference? Why would you choose 4 versus 5 days? And that simply comes down to the cohorts of students that are in the building on that Wednesday. So the only students that would be present in the building on Wednesday, so to speak, would be students that are in sub-separate programs that meet that high needs category. If we have students that have a full inclusion or partial inclusion plan, or is an ELL student perhaps that doesn't have an IEP, the only place for them to go potentially is into a sub-separate classroom, because obviously all teachers are teaching remote during that Wednesday time. And so it creates some problems with compliance around the amount of time a partial or full inclusion student may have if they're also attending on that Wednesday, or a student that doesn't perhaps have an IEP at all attending on Wednesday, with the only place to receive in-person instruction being inside of special education classrooms. That's really the distinction between those two categories of students. So just to kind of recap, students that are low or moderate need level who have full or partial inclusion IEPs and don't meet the other criteria will then therefore be receiving hybrid services. They'll get their IEP services between a combination of the 2 days that they're in their inclusion cohort, and then also potentially remotely, depending on what the student's IEP calls for. If they have 5 days of services, let's say in reading, they will get 2 in person and then 3 remote, is how that will essentially work out for a low need, moderate need, full inclusion student who does not meet the other criteria set by the Department of Education. By the end of this week, we're notifying families via our notification system via email with a letter for those students that fit into these criteria. So all students will get a letter. It's either going to come out saying, based on the Department of Ed criteria, your child will fall within the hybrid category of receiving services and attending school, and that the hybrid schedule will be to follow from their schools. It will identify if they're 4-day or 5-day a week in-person services. Could you go to the next one? Just in terms of additional information, we are going to try to continue as much as possible IEP meetings virtually, in part because of the social distance and DPH guidelines, and to just reduce the amount of visitors to the school. It becomes very difficult, especially when now the buildings are going to be utilizing all the open larger spaces in all the schools, to potentially find a room that's going to fit 7 or 8 people to be able to socially distance and have an IEP meeting. So as much as we are able, we're going to, try to do that virtually until we have some restrictions, lifting of some of the restrictions. Students on the hybrid schedule, again, will receive services, the combination of both in person and remotely. In the spring and in the summer, students' parents received a remote learning plan. They have kind of renamed it the state, and they gave us a different template this time around, so it will look a little bit different. It'll be a little lengthier, and it's called a special education learning plan now. That again will be done in collaboration with this child's liaison and their parents, talking about what services might look like if it has to be delivered differently than what's on their IEP. So our students that attend 5 days a week may not need a special education learning plan if they are receiving all of their services the way the IEP is written and expected to be implemented. Our hybrid students and our students that attend 4 days a week will definitely be receiving a special education learning plan to make sure that there's clarity around what services are being provided during the school day, what then are being provided remote, and what that might look like, what the schedule might be. So it will be a little more specific than the remote plans that the state had us create in the spring. The only time you would have a student that's a 5-day-a-week in-person student receiving this plan is if for some reason you have a service that's being provided differently than usual, either due to, a staffing issue, or if perhaps we have an issue with somebody providing a service, attending multiple cohorts a day, a staff member, we may end up having a child participate in, let's say, a remote speech session once a week. If that were to occur, then we're going to have that go as a remote learning plan. Anything that would be delivered differently than it's written on the IEP will be on that special education learning plan. And so IEPs, again, will be continue to be written as if we were traditionally in school, with the learning plan being the reflection of if there's something being provided differently, the service on the IEP being provided differently. That will also be a document. So if you have let's say an annual review in the fall, you may have an IEP generated reflecting what it would be if your student was attending 5 days a week, we were back to regular school. You will also then get, if your student, let's say, is hybrid, you will also get a special education learning plan. So I know there was a little confusion around that in the spring. I think parents maybe felt like their IEPs were kind of not valid or something anymore, and that is certainly not the case. If anything needs to be delivered differently, the special education learning plan will cover that. Just in terms of numbers, I thought it might be helpful. So between those two groups of students that are going to be attending 4 days a week and those that are going to be attending 5 days a week, it's about 143 students, or about 21% of our special education population. which is a lot. And I think compared, which is great. I mean, we really wanted to try to maximize the amount of in-person learning we could give our students. There are some districts that are really only putting your sub-separate high need students in, and sometimes they're only attending 4 half days a week or 4 days a week, and everybody else is hybrid. Because the Department of Ed, again, didn't give any clear guidance around what that means to prioritize, just that there needed to be some thought to making sure that those students receive some in-person learning. So I know that it's very hard to feel sometimes as though, you know, assessing a child's needs based on paper and categories, it does certainly not reflect what a student needs and the struggles that they have ongoing are. It is important that we make sure we follow the Department of Ed criteria as much as possible. So again, you know, these are based on numbers, they're based on services that a student receives. And so I know that there's people that are going to be unhappy, because I think it's hard to have students that have needs that are at home potentially for a few days a week. So I think it's important we have those conversations with parents to be able to look at how to support them at home, to make sure that these learning plans that are being created are reflective of something that's doable with families and that the student will benefit from. So I think those first couple of weeks where your liaisons are reaching out, it's important to make sure that, you know, if there were struggles or if there's something that worked or something that didn't, that those kinds of needs or weaknesses are captured in these plans, so that we don't have a situation where we have a plan that's been written that is just not working for the family. It's not working for the child either. So I think that's it, but I'm sure there's questions. So.
Thanks, Allison. And perhaps, Ms. Bryson, it might be best, because of the different folks we have cycling through, maybe to pause for questions after each one, if that's all right.
Sure, that sounds great. Mrs. Newhouse, is that a hand?
Yes. Just a couple questions.
Sure.
How are we going to be handling kids who need reevaluations or assessments for IEPs? Will we still be doing those in-person assessments, or how are they going to be handled?
Yep. So there's protocols for how to clean testing materials. We also have plastic dividers as well. They're not called dividers, but they are essentially shields we've purchased for anybody that would be in a situation that has either an assessment situation, or you have maybe some people have a smaller office and even with masks might not be comfortable. Just kind of one extra layer of dividing. The expectation is once students are back in school that the evaluations can continue. We have all the PPE equipment. There's also sanitization protocols that are written by the testing companies around the utilization and recommendations about how to not engage in sharing of materials during the testing session. So I do think that that is doable. I am at the same time looking at remote as much as possible assessments. There are some groups of students that are not able to engage in remote, and for whom that would be very difficult. I do, you know, the school psychologist in me dies thinking about doing an assessment Zoom, just as somebody that did that for years. But I do think we need to explore every option at this point, just because I think there's necessarily no end in sight. From a district point of view, we've also looked at trying to contract with service providers to help us. Just because I think us and every other district is in a situation where we have a little bit of a backlog of assessments that need to be completed as well. So we're kind of working on it from all angles, but I think, you know, with thoughts around how to make sure that that distance remains, but you maintain the integrity of the assessment, I think it is doable.
Okay, great. Just one more question.
Sure.
And I think, you know, the plan sounds great. And, you know, I know a lot of special ed parents are eager to hear where all their students fall, but what happens if we end up being fully remote for these high needs kids? I'm assuming that they're going to have to be fully remote as well, and they're all going to end up with an SELP plan, or is there thoughts that we're going to bring in just these high needs kids into the buildings, or what happens?
I might defer to Glenn on this. I would say that my preference would be to continue with our high needs kids as much as we possible. I know the reason why we go remote might impact whether or not we can have students in the building, perhaps, but I don't know if Dr.
I would agree with that. I think that it will be contingent upon what the specific circumstance is and for what the factors are or the criteria to put us into that specific situation. You know, it's possible as we start to frame our mindset around this that perhaps a particular building needs to close. That obviously would be very different for the children that may be in that particular school. That all could look very different if there's some other direction that's put in place by the state that may force our hand at which direction we ultimately take. So there'll be I think right now it's fair to say sort of a case by case basis and with lots of different factors that will determine ultimately. But the overarching commitment that Alice has spoken about is represented here, and that's to try and get these particular groups of children into schools as much as possible.
Okay, great. Just a follow-up question on that. For like the 2 weeks that we're phasing in where there's smaller cohorts going in each day, will these students be phased in as well and just be part of those cohorts? So part of those 2 weeks will be, you know, remote for them, or are they being brought in immediately?
So I think for the 5-day-a-week students, the expectation is that they're in September 16th. The 4-day-a-week students, I think we just have to work out the logistics around the cohorts. And something I probably should have just elaborated on. If you're coming 4 days a week and you're a partial inclusion student, that means that you have a combination of special ed services and general education services. We have to be careful about the mixing of cohorts. And so you'll 2 days a week attend a cohort. On the other 2 days a week, you are essentially going to be supported remote learning from inside the building and then receiving also whatever special education services you might receive on those days. You know, we have a combination issue with them going all 4 days into a classroom. One, we have the cohort and the concerns around the student being in with 2 separate groups of children. The other issue becomes essentially their repeat days, right? So cohort A and cohort B are learning the same material. So if the student's there, they're repeating the content on the second 2 days. And so the intention is for those students that come 4 days a week that they would be engaging in remote learning. If they're Zooming with a Google meeting with a class, they might they're going to do that in whatever classroom that they're in, which would be a kind of a remote cohort, right? With staff to support them and helping them complete the assignments and the activities that might be due that day, and receiving special ed services if they fall in that category as well. So, you know, we're trying not to mix the cohorts, but maximizing the amount of time that the students are in the building to receive their services.
Great, thank you.
So I should have elaborated on that.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee?
I have a question. I don't know if you can see me.
I can.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to, this is like an incredibly thoughtful approach to this whole thing. So I just wanted to say that I think it's making a lot of sense to me. I just want to clarify a couple of things just so I'm fully understanding of it. So basically the state has asked basically all districts to categorize their special needs students into 3 different categories.
Well, they automatically are categorized actually based on services. It's a PL3 form.
That's not a COVID thing. That's
oh no, it's just part of the process. It's actually an administrative form, and it's just literally based on the services on a grid, the amount of time and where the services are received. Yep.
Okay. So based on those already established categories that have been used for
yep.
a while, if a student is in the high needs category, right, which means that they're
yep.
getting more than 75% of their day is spent receiving special ed services, or they're sub-separate, they would be on a 5-day-a-week plan.
High needs and separate meeting those criteria. Yes, 5 days a week.
A student who is on a 4-day-a-week plan would have complex and significant needs. So that would be students who spend, they have some inclusion time. It's not all special ed services. They have some inclusion time, but it's still, there's something more significant than a student who receives most of their services in inclusion. Is that correct?
So if, for example, if you had a partial inclusion student with a moderate level of need, they actually are hybrid based on the state's criteria. The thing that will make them be eligible for more days is essentially any of the other criteria that's listed. So for example, they might be an L student, they might be a child in foster care, they might have disability related difficulties engaging in remote learning. So if you get through the high needs and then the other categories, let's say that's a no, they're not a high needs student and they're not a sub-separate student. If they meet any of the other criteria, then they become a 4-day-a-week student.
Okay, so sort of on that one slide where it talked about 2 of these 3 criteria, and there's a bunch of other criteria below that.
Tristan, could you go back? There you go.
Yeah, that one. So that bottom section, starting with students who engage all the way to English learners, those kids would be the 4-day-a-week kids.
4 days a week, right? So if you don't meet the top, and I'm trying to point, but nobody can see me doing that. If you don't meet the top because you're not a high need students and you don't meet the circle bullets, which would be you don't meet 2, 3 circle bullets, then you look at the bottom. Thank you. And then if you look at the bottom, regardless of whether you have an IEP, so if you have an IEP for partial inclusion and you're a moderate level of need student, but you use augmentative communication, then you come 4 days a week.
Gotcha.
You're homeless, you come 4 days a week regardless. We've prioritized our homeless students as a 4-day-a-week group, whether they have an IEP or not. Our foster care students, our ELL students are all 4-day-a-week students as well.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Thank you.
Great. Sure.
Thank you, Jay. Any other questions from the committee? Mr. Ragsdale?
Before I have a couple questions for Alice, but I want to ask something very quickly for Dr. Brand. The survey results that you showed us, were the 400 students who had marked both options removed from those results that we saw earlier in this presentation? So what we were looking at is just the people who made a clear choice?
No.
Is that?
Sorry. No, those students were factored in. There may have been a couple situations in which the principals had, despite repeated efforts, still not been able to make contact with families, but by and large, the vast majority of all of those students were factored in and placed in one of the 2 options, hybrid or remote.
Okay, so these were compiled after the outreach was done, and we had figured out what their family's true intentions were.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, great, thanks. So I wanted to ask in SPED. So I don't think this was on a slide, but I think Alice, you said this. That was it. 21% of the SPED students are going to be prioritized for some form of in-person.
4 or more days a week. Yep.
4 more days a week, right? 4 days or 5 days. Is the distribution of these students fairly even across the schools, or do we have some pockets of high need?
Well, so we have programs that are not consistently in every building. And so that's going to actually impact some buildings having more students that might be coming 5 days a week than others. And then, the middle school and high school, just because of volume, are very, very high. And the high school specifically, because they have some programs that no one else has, just because of the age. So I would say that, the general kind of need students are the Shawsheen, the West, the Wildwood, because we have some programs that start in early childhood at the Wildwood side of town, and then the middle school, high school. There are students in every building, but there's definitely larger pockets in some schools because of the programming we have district-wide.
Okay. Do we foresee having to kind of reassign or repurpose staff to be able to cover that? Are we looking at having to shift people between buildings?
Not right now. I would say our sub-separate students already have teachers and programs in place. So there's, minimal impact in the sense of staffing, because those students would have been coming 5 days a week with the staffing that exists at the moment. I know that there is some movement around the 4-day-a-week students and just trying to determine, building principals are really looking at this, who's going to support the remote learning days for some of those students. So I think that they are looking at how they're assigning staff according to that, because they may not be special education staff that are doing that.
Okay. Yeah, and I had one more question, which is kind of follow up to what you already thankfully or gratefully you elaborated on, the 4-day model. So the 2 remote days that the students are in school, Can you talk even a little bit more about how we expect that to look? I mean, I think that the remote days under the hybrid model are generally going to be asynchronous rather than synchronous. So it doesn't
Yep.
seem that they're not going to be live zooming into classes while they're remote. That it will be more asynchronous assignments. So what kind of supervision support
Yep.
do we envision them having? And you also mentioned that they will on those days still receive special education services.
Right.
Can you give some examples of the types of services that they will be receiving on those days and how that will be kind of fit in schedule wise with completing their remote assignments?
Sure. So it's going to vary depending on the student that is in that group. So for example, we might have a student that is a partial inclusion student that spends a little less than half their day receiving special education services. And so the expectation would be during their special ed services, they would receive those as part of their day. And then the inclusion piece is where we can't have them obviously back in the other cohort. And so whatever activities that they would be doing, watching the video that the teacher may be assigned for the remote learning for that day, completing the assignments, would be done with a staff member. And so if that student is, requires extreme modifications or accommodations, that staff member might in fact be a special ed staff to help that student, work on those assignments. It also might be an educational assistant helping to monitor the students that are a little bit more independent and able to access their curriculum. I think it's going to depend on a bit on the breakdown of, so for example, at the middle school, obviously they have a higher group. The high school has a higher group of those students than some of the other buildings. Some of the other buildings have, single digit numbers of students that would be coming on 4 days. And so it makes it a little bit more manageable about how to support those students. At the high school, they're looking at creating some classrooms for those students to be able to do their work with staff appropriate based on the students' needs.
Okay, and so that could really look different in different buildings, and
I
with different
expect it
cohorts
will,
of
just
students.
because of the needs, the grade breakdowns, and what each individual. So the students would have an IEP that receive, a specialized reading program, perhaps could be getting that during that time, and there could be students left behind in that classroom still working on, their general education math assignments, with an educational assistant supporting if needed.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Questions from the committee? Can't see you all, but I can see most of you. I'm not seeing anything. Alice, I just have one question actually.
Yep.
So you said that parents will hear this Friday as
Yep.
to whether or not their child is in the 4 or the 5 day, correct?
Actually, all just to keep us from having people feel as though maybe they missed something. I'm going to send it out for every single student that has an IEP in the district, and then our L students and our foster care and homeless students. They'll be receiving an email from our office identifying them as either hybrid, 4-day, or 5-day, based on the Department of Ed criteria.
Okay. And do they have a choice? Have some of them maybe written or filled out the survey and said remote only?
Yes, they have.
So they
There
will
are. Yep. So I feel like it's important that we communicate what we're able to offer to parents. So I think even if parents have, and we do have parents of high needs sub-separate students who have chosen to do remote, I think it's still important that they know that they're eligible to come 5 days, they're eligible to come 4 days, whatever that might be, because it may impact their decision. You never know. I think it's important for the district to just be clear about we want particularly students with high needs with lots of services to be in the building as much as possible.
Okay.
So.
And if a parent were to get the 5, their child qualifies for 5 days, but they don't actually want them in the building 5 days, is there?
Yep.
They have choice there or no?
I mean, I think it could always be worked out. I think I am hesitant that, I think we're in a public health crisis that's, we've never experienced this before. So we certainly want kids and parents to be comfortable sending their students to school. But I do want to have the conversation with parents about for students that are eligible 5 days a week, they're eligible for lots of reasons because they may have difficulty engaging in the remote learning. So it's going to make it very difficult potentially for that student to continue to make the same amount of progress. So I think it's worth a conversation, but ultimately I think the decision does land with the parent to make sure that they're comfortable and that like their child's safe. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
I'm not seeing any other hands, but please speak up if I'm missing you, school committee. And if not, I think we can move on, Dr. Brandt.
Thank you. These topics per se are, again, they're not necessarily interconnected by any means, but just again, part of the larger ongoing work that's associated with our reopening. Miss Newhouse is here from the Wilmington Board of Health. Again, as you all know, she has been a tremendous resource with our entire team and our entire efforts. And I just thought that she might want to give an update to the committee and the community in terms of sort of where our numbers are at. And then Ms. Crow is going to provide some updates as it relates to Department of Public Health and DESE safety requirements. Ms. Newhouse.
Hi, everybody. So the map that you're seeing is a weekly map that the DPH is putting out of cases in each town. So this week is information as of August 19th, but there is a new map that came out today, but it hasn't changed for us. So really it's essentially the same map. Right now in Wilmington, we have 7 active positive cases within the past 2 weeks, and we have 7 in quarantine. So this, and this map actually portrays that as well. So if you go on the mass.gov website, I'll post it. I'll post the new map, but it's essentially the same as this one. So every Wednesday, the state will post the status. We're still in the green status, and our numbers are matching. So they can change daily, hourly, but so right now our numbers are matching. Some of the new things that came out is they're requiring flu shots for all students or all kids, I should say, by the end of the year. And just something to keep in mind, something that Wilmington, that we as the health department are thinking about is we're thinking about doing a drive-through clinic. So that'll be something new, and that'll be coming up sooner rather than later. So that's just it. We're in our planning stages. I don't have any vaccine yet. It's coming. So that'll be coming up next is our flu clinics. So I don't know if anyone had any questions since the last time that we spoke.
Ragsdale.
Just very quickly, what is our current average daily positive rate?
Well, I don't have an average daily rate. I just go, I mean, it changes every single day. So right now we're at 7 active positives. It goes by every 2 weeks is how they calculate it. But we've been steady under 10 for probably well over a month, which is a good thing.
Okay, so that sounds like a daily rate of probably in like the 2 to 3.
I mean, I can go a day or 2 without a case, and then 2 pop up. So, you know, maybe in 2 weeks, if you think about it, I have 7 active positives. So, you know, it averages out to be less than 1 a day.
Okay, but since we're green, we have to be under 4 per 100,000 residents. I think
right.
That's the definition. Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Sorry, MJ. Yep, you're on my 3rd screen for some reason. You're muted though.
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Quick question. With the new criteria of flu shots for students, are we making that documentation request when parents submit their students' healthcare records? I know that with the new drive-through aspect, which I'm really happy to hear, I didn't know what forms of documentation will be, that is the district now requiring, as well as, you know, if these drive-throughs do come through for any parents who may be interested for themselves or their children, will there be documentation that can be submitted if for the district? I'm not sure if that's been planned out yet. It might, and I know with the drive-through it's premature, but I didn't know what Dr. Brand, what we are doing as a district to collect that information of immunization.
You know, I'll ask Ms. Crow, who I think is on the call, to speak to that if she could.
Sure, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So we would require documentation for proof of vaccination for the flu vaccine, and that can be provided by the healthcare provider, the local board of health, or the local pharmacies. So we would require something in writing.
Does that go through to the administration, or there's similar to the health forms that are going out? I'm assuming we're still doing those annual health forms for children.
Yes, so that can be, yes, it's acceptable for it to be received on a health form or some other type of documentation. So if a child just went to the physician to receive a flu vaccine, they would receive a document from the physician that can be turned into the school. And the school, this is what we're responsible for, keeping track of the documentation.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
MJ. Can I just ask one quick question, Ms. Newhouse? Last time you talked with us, you mentioned the young people in their 20s and 30s. Do we have a sense if that trend is continuing, or can you share that or no?
Yeah, it is continuing. I have two 20-year-olds right now that they're positives. So they're in college. So even though they live in Wilmington, they're not here. So they're quarantining or isolating up at wherever they are at school. So I'm still seeing that trend I have a couple that are, between the ages of 20 and 25.
Thank you for that. All right, I don't see any other hand. Oh, Mr. Ragsdale.
Just to follow up on that, to clarify, so some of the positive cases that are officially attributed to Wilmington are not necessarily people currently residing physically in Wilmington. That's simply what essentially their address is. That's what their permanent home address is. That sounds like what you just described with the college students.
Yep.
Okay. Any others like that, or are the others all actually present in Wilmington?
They're all present in Wilmington. So I have five physically living in Wilmington and two that are not.
Great, thanks.
Very much. All right, I think.
Okay, Ms. Crow, did you want to take, or Ms. Newhouse? I'm sorry, I'm not sure who wanted to take this slide. Just an update from the DESE.
Ken? Is that okay with you, Shelley?
Oh,
yeah, I'm just reading.
Yeah. So the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education jointly released a memo with the Department of Public Health with a particular focus on the protocols for responding to COVID-19 scenarios in schools, on the bus, and in the community setting. They refined and updated the information as a result of questions that came from practical implementation of both the DESE and Department of Public Health guidance, as well as from evolving medical and scientific findings related to COVID-19. So as we all know, the information we've been receiving has been very fluid. So the DESE and DPH intended to collaborate through the school year to conduct periodic reviews of the guidance, and they will issue additional updates as necessary. There's a lot of information on this sheet. I'll try to go through it as quickly as possible for everybody. So the definition of a close contact is a student or staff member that tests positive for COVID-19. Their close contacts would be defined as only those who have been within 6 feet of distance of the individual for at least 15 minutes while the person was infectious. The second item is, let's see here, return to school after COVID-19 symptoms. All close contacts should be tested but must self-quarantine for 14 days after the last exposure to the person who tested positive, regardless of the test results. And then the next item is sorry, I don't know if I'm gone in the right order that you have it, and I have it on the memo.
Am I on, just a second, am I on the other slide from, whoops.
Nope, you're on the right one.
Okay, all right.
COVID-19 related fever. The threshold for fever has been changed by the Centers for Disease Control. It was 100.4 degrees. It is now 100.0 degrees. Students wearing masks whenever possible. Students in pre-K through grade 1 who can safely and appropriately wear masks, and we know that we are requiring it for all students now. The use of the mask is still required unless students are eating lunch or taking a mask break. And the students must be 6 feet apart when doing so. Physical distancing guidelines. DESE recommends that districts aim for 6 feet of distance where feasible, and when not feasible, a minimum of 3 feet is acceptable. Students must wear a mask if they are closer than 6 feet, covering the mouth and the nose at all times. School immunization requirements, I'll get into that a little bit further on the next couple of slides. There are 2 new requirements starting this school year. Physical exams for students entering school for the first time, typically in pre-K and K, are an in-person physical exam should be conducted 1 year before or within 90 days of school start. For elementary and high school students, typically 4th and 10th grade, the exam may be conducted up to 2 years before or within 120 days of school start. So that's a change than what we're used to. For middle school students, typically grade 7 is what we require for a physical exam. And vision, hearing, and height and weight screenings at this time, those requirements pursuant to the general laws will remain suspended. And that's it. So immunization requirements, I'm going to cover everything. I don't know how many slides you have, Dr. Brand, but I'll just cover everything.
Actually, just one, I think.
Just one? Okay, good.
Yep.
The Massachusetts Department of Public Health is requiring 2 school immunizations beginning the 2020-21 school year. The flu vaccine requirement is 1 dose of seasonal flu vaccine for the current flu season must be received annually for anyone 6 months of age or older by December 31st. So that is for all students that are school age, so pre-K to grade 12. And new students that start between January 1st and March 31st must have received a dose of vaccine for the current flu season in order to enter school. The reason for the flu vaccine, well, flu vaccine is always important to receive, but in addition to that, during the COVID-19 pandemic, influenza vaccine is especially critical to reduce the overall impact of respiratory illness on the population, protect vulnerable populations from severe illness, and decrease the overall burden of the healthcare system. Flu vaccine will be required for school attendance as effective as December 31st for all students in pre-K to grade 12. The school requirement does apply to all Massachusetts students enrolled in pre-K through 12, regardless of whether the district is providing instruction in person, using hybrid or remote learning model. And then I'm going to talk about meningitis vaccine. This only applies to grade 7 and grade 11. For grade 7, 1 dose of the meningococcal vaccine is required. And for grade 11, 2 doses are required. And that second dose must be given on or after the 16th birthday. And I just want to talk about exemptions for a minute. So Massachusetts does allow medical exemptions and religious exemptions. They do not recognize philosophical exemptions. A medical exemption is a statement from a physician stating that a vaccine is medically contraindicated for a student. And a religious exemption is a statement from a student or a parent or guardian if the student is less than 18 years of age, stating that a vaccine is against sincerely held religious beliefs. So at this point, I want to strongly encourage parents and guardians to, if you haven't already done so, to schedule an appointment with your child's pediatrician to update your child's vaccines. As I already mentioned, the flu vaccine is available from healthcare providers. It's available from the local Board of Health when Shelley receives the vaccine, and it is available from local pharmacies. And we will share the information with families on the Wilmington flu clinics as soon as it becomes available. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crow. Okay, continuing to move on. The next item of update tonight, one that certainly seems secondary to all of this in terms of health and plan.
Sorry,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just, since as we did with Ms. Brown-LeGrand, if we could pause for a moment just for questions on the guidance. So in the new guidance that was issued, the memo from DESE and DPH, which, I mean, I didn't have them right next to each other to look, but which of them have changed? Like this was a new memo of clarification, and some of them it was clear, like the temperature was dropped from 100.4 to 100. Which of the other ones were specifically changed from any prior guidance? And is there a particular direction that the guidance has changed in? Like on the close contact, I think I remember that previously close contact was just anyone in the room. Is that right? That if you were in the room, then it was considered a contact. So a whole room might have to quarantine if one student turned positive. And this, now that they're relaxing that a little bit, it's not quite as conservative as the previous guidance saying that now a close contact is within 6 feet. Are there other similar shifts in this guidance in the other bullet points?
Yeah, so everything that was on the slide contained a slight change in the guidance that we originally previously received.
Okay, I will tell you that DPH and DESE were in a bit of a little, hit a wall with one another, and they had two different sets of guidance, which was a little, which was very difficult. So with a lot of pressure, we finally got them to come together and have the same guidance, because we'd never be able to, what was different for someone who wasn't in school versus someone who was in school was different. So now it's all the same.
Okay, and is there any way to characterize the way that they made the necessary compromises, or how the changes are?
I'm glad they did it.
Do they provide explanations of what leads them to make some new recommendations? Do they cite additional studies or research that causes them to alter the recommendations?
I haven't seen any. It's been since DESE first came out with their guidance a couple months ago, or a month or two ago. And then they were different from our DPH guidance that we've been following all along. So that was a big point, a big bone of contention with local boards of health and DESE to make sure, and DPH to make sure that we could have one set.
Well, that makes perfect sense. Certainly having, different guidance from different state agencies would be a recipe for chaos. I just suppose that I would like them to show their work and
I'm sure it's out there. I just it's definitely out there, but I just haven't seen it. I'm just happy that we're on the same page.
Maybe we can provide that, Dr. Brink, maybe we can send something, whatever we find, send that out to the school committee. All right, next up.
And sorry, I just had one other question about the immunizations, which is that so the immunization law, so the MGL on immunization for school states that the that in the absence of an emergency or basically a pandemic disease, that a religious exemption doesn't require a medical proof of immunization. Given that we are in a declared emergency, are we considering treating that any differently?
No, we would treat it the same as we would any religious exemption, even prior to the pandemic. And that is a statement from the student or the parent or guardian. So just a written statement.
Okay, do we have any currently, since plenty of immunizations are currently required, even though not the flu vaccine, do we have students in Wilmington who are not immunized for some of those diseases because of religious or medical exemptions? I'm
Yes.
sure for medical.
Yes, we do. And so it is required annually that families renew the exemption that they have in place. And what happens at the beginning of the school year is the school nurses review the health records for the students that have an exemption, and a letter is sent out to the families to remind them to renew the annual exemption. And then if there were an outbreak of any type of disease, the students would be excluded from school.
Thank you, Ms.
Thanks.
All right, Dr. Brand.
I had a question. Sorry.
Sorry, Jay, I couldn't see you.
That's okay. My question again is about the close contact part of this. Are we talking about 15 minutes, like a duration of 15 minutes, or is it 15 minutes cumulative over the day? The issue that I see with this close contact is sort of the teacher who's in charge has to, so a student tests, they learn their student tests positive, and now they have to go back and decide, okay, who is near this kid for 15 minutes. I can just see that being a very difficult thing. So I think at least clarifying that it's a sustained 15 minutes, or if it's a cumulative 15 minutes over the course of a day, especially with elementary school kids.
It's 15 minutes that you've been in direct contact. So say you had a whole classroom and you have 5 little tables and you have the same 5 kids at one table and they stay there, then they would be all the close contacts. But the other tables, if they weren't in any contact with that other table, they are not, even though they're in the same room for more than 15 minutes, but they weren't with that table all day, then they wouldn't be a contact. So think about, I think from what I understand, the classrooms, from walking through them the other day, they're going to be, the smaller kids will be kind of with their little group. So if you're just sitting in a classroom all day, but you have one kid that's at the back of the class and one in the front, and they never come together and they've worn their masks all day, then I wouldn't consider them close contacts.
Okay, I mean, I'm just thinking about how, I know the way teaching is going to happen in the classroom is going to be a lot different than it typically is, where you would have several different groupings of students over the course of the day. Kids wouldn't always stay with the same, one little table of kids, for their 5 kids all day. You would be mixing and matching and doing all sorts of other things. So, I'm just, thank you for the clarification on that. I'm still very concerned about that.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult. The teachers, each teacher is going to have to really, when we go back and try to do contact tracing, each teacher is just going to have, it's really just about individually working with each teacher and classroom to figure out who we think is a close contact.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, haven't we determined that we need to have assigned seating? I feel that that's something we've already stated, that students will have to have assigned seating so that we can do this after the fact, where we know where each person was sitting and can draw a radius of the students that were around any given student. I'm pretty sure that that's already been covered in a previous meeting, right?
They will have assigned seats. Yes.
Next slide.
All right, most of these items, I'll just point out, I know that this is a lot of information, but almost every single one of these items from members of the committee are here tonight because there's a timeliness to them. That holds true for special ed. We wanted you to make sure that you were aware and our community was aware as that information needs to roll up by the Office of Student Support Services. These updates on Department of Public Health and DESE safety requirements, and so too is this, as well as the next one, transportation. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Mia, our new athletic director, who's here to take you through, broadly speaking, some of the highlights as it revolves around sports. Mia?
Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet everyone, kind of. Just to go over a few things, last week there was guidance handed out by the MIA, which was also in conjunction with DESE, in regards to what an athletic season calendar will look like and what sports have been approved by the MIAA based on the EEA guidelines that were set out a few weeks ago. Those are actually linked in this presentation, but in addition to that, they did decide on having a 4-season athletic calendar for the 2020-21 year. The sports that we offer are bolded, just to clarify, but it was deemed that football and cheer are considered to be in those high-risk categories. So they will not be happening this fall, and they will be moved to what we've been calling either the wedge season or the floating season that will be done in the end of February to the end of April. And in addition to this, just to be really clear with everyone that those sports have been approved, the MIA is also working with their individual sport committees to develop sport-specific accommodations and recommendations about how we can modify the sports to ensure that they are following those EEA guidelines. Those were due yesterday and will be made public to the athletic directors by next Tuesday. So it is a little bit of a slower timeline that we're looking at. And all the sports that are on there are categorized within those EEA guidelines as low, moderate, or high risk sports, just to be clear with everyone. And then for the fall season, we have to think about as a group, you know, how we can keep those modifications to the level that we feel comfortable with as well. Ultimately, the final decision to participate in interscholastic athletics will be ultimately up to each individual school district. Next slide, please. In thinking about this, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about what the different options are and what our goals are for interscholastic athletics. And I just kind of grouped them into some major categories that can obviously be, you know, modified. But the first is option 1, which is full participation in the outlined MIAA and DESE approved sports. For us, that would be soccer, field hockey, golf, volleyball, and cross country, because football and cheer will be moved to that wedge season. Option 2 would be modified interscholastic competition to limit travel, number on buses, total participants, number of teams, and interaction with student athletes from other towns and potential exposure. The third option is no interscholastic athletics. And with that being said, if that is the goal, just to safely return students to school. Next slide. In thinking about the goals for Wilmington in regards to athletics, there are some additional areas for consideration that I've been thinking about. The first is the overall benefit of participation in high school athletics, which include better educational outcomes, enhanced school engagement, sense of belonging, youth development and life skills, healthier behaviors, post-high school positive results, and developing better citizens. And I'm sure that list could go on and on. The next is health and safety and what we need to think about. Will we require COVID waivers or a negative test? Will we do temperature checks? What the locker room safety protocols will be for student athletes that are practicing, or if we do have competitions. notification of possible exposure, which I'm sure will be very similar to what students would be doing in school, whose responsibility is the sanitation of equipment, and the possible implications for those learning cohorts that are set out. The next is logistics, which is pretty simple, just what a realistic start date would be if we decided to participate, what transportation would look like, if remote learners can participate, and what our protocols would be for fans and spectators. The last is coaching, for those student athletes who will be missing out on, or they missed out on the spring and will possibly not be able to participate in the fall. Do we offer some supplemental programs such as leadership courses, mentor programs, and strength and conditioning to help support those student athletes? And also, what are our expectations for coaches in regards to contact with student athletes and things like that? Next slide. Mr. Brand. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks. So just a couple of last slide here, a couple of updates. So the Middlesex League, which I think committee members know we are a part of. I can share with you that all the league athletic directors and superintendents met earlier this week to discuss plans. And there is a very broadly speaking, a commitment to be aligned. That is recognized, I think, rightly so by everyone, that it makes absolutely no sense for one district to be marching off in one direction, doing something when we're talking, for the most part, not completely, but for the most part, with neighboring districts. So that was the first meeting with intention to come back together again and sort of circle collectively around where we may be going. This is an important piece, though, and again, this is the timely element of why this is here ultimately tonight, that there is DESE guidance that refers to directly to athletics. And beyond what I just said about the Middlesex League and the commitment to be in unison to the greatest extent possible, that DESE guidance in the middle of this slide, districts designated as yellow, green, or unshaded based upon the DPH metric that nonetheless have their high schools remotely starting at the beginning of the season. That can take a different direction. Nevertheless, depending on what color we are in the metric, it is going to be my recommendation, and I can't speak for all of my superintendent colleagues, but I suspect for most that they'll be seeking their school committee vote. And so the recommendation here, as this all unfolds, is to have your vote at the September 9th meeting, your next meeting, currently scheduled, in order to sort of signal for us which direction we go. So next steps, continuing the dialogue with Middlesex League. Obviously, of course, monitoring any other developments from DESE or the Interscholastic Association at the state level, and then again, school committee approval in September. I think that that's it for sports. It is. And so with that, I'm not sure if folks have any questions for Mia or myself.
Questions? I can only see Jay and David, but David?
So in the modified participation option, that seems like a lot of possibilities within life. The slide itself talks about limiting travel, the numbers on buses, total participants, number of teams, and many other things. I was wondering, within that option, can you flesh out, it almost seems like that could have a whole bunch of sub options because there's so many combinations of those things. But what are some potential ways that might look if we are trying to do a modified approach?
Yeah, in thinking about this, and the hope is to have those JV and freshman teams still be able to participate, but that could be a varsity only model with JV and freshman teams doing sport-specific skills throughout the week. That could be limiting how many practices or how many competitions per week. That could talk about Saturday interscholastic competition to limit those travel numbers or how many times we are going on the bus. It could be, there are a lot of, I did leave that very wide open for the reason that, I think there are a lot of ideas out there and I don't want to kind of push us in one specific direction if there are different ideas coming within the league, and those things are changing every day. You know, there are so many ideas coming from other athletic directors, other school districts, thinking about, you know, how can we make this happen for student athletes because it is so important. But, you know, those logistical pieces are difficult to maintain. And so that was my thought process for that.
Mr. Samaha.
So thinking about this and thinking about this option too, and sort of going with Mr. Ragsdale said about how there could be so many different options here. Could it also vary, you know, by sport where, you know, soccer might have a more limited travel, whereas girls volleyball might not, or something like that? Or would it have to be, you know, all sports are this one way, I guess?
No, I think as a league, we are looking to align each other because, like Dr. Brand said, if 3 or 4 schools are deciding to go in one direction, that limits who we are able to compete against, and will help mold our schedule. I do think that we very much all want to be aligned. On that note, though, there is an option for each school district to decide, you know, depending on what the decision is, to move certain sports to that floating season. It's not just limited to football and cheer. So if there was some, you know, commentary about, you know, what specific sports that the district is feeling comfortable having or not, then we can talk about if some of those sports need to be moved. But no, I think that any and all ideas are being taken into consideration. But as a league, we very much want to stay aligned with what each of us are doing so that we can ensure that if there is interscholastic, you know, athletics, that we will have someone to play, would be the big part.
And one other question too, about the football and cheer being moved to that wedge season or whatever you call it. Is there an option for that to be? Is that the only option for football and cheer? Would it be that season from February to April, or could that be moved off to spring if that were feasible? Just asking the question.
Yeah, that hasn't been handed out to us from the MIA for right now. They are put into that season, but I think with how much everything is changing, and the MIA is very much dedicated to voting and talking about each sport that's involved in each season prior to that season starting to figure out what would be the best fit. So ultimately, I think, yeah, that it could be a possibility. But as of right now, they haven't really given us an indication of whether that could be moved to the spring or not.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Ragsdale.
So what exactly would we be voting on at the next meeting? Because I mean, would it be a specific modified option that says we are going to have varsity soccer, but we're not going to have JV soccer and so forth, you know, basically listing all the details? Or would this be more broadly an almost, you know, authorization for the district to participate in athletics according to what the Middlesex League seems to all agree between? I mean, I'm more inclined to the latter. I would be more inclined to look at the situation of that we're going to authorize interscholastic sports and then leave it to the district to determine, you know, including up to full participation if that becomes appropriate and agreed upon. But that essentially leave the details of that for the district to determine on a season by season or sport by sport basis. I don't think I'd want to be voting on like a detailed plan.
No, and I appreciate the question, and that would be the intention. That to be fair, you know, they don't have specific vote language, but it is along those lines of two things. It is along the lines really of authorizing the district to proceed in one particular direction or not. But equally important for those districts that, you know, where high schools are starting remotely, and we are starting to hear more about that, as you know. We are not currently planning for that, but I'll talk a little bit more about some of the struggles that we're having as related to the high school. But you know, Reading has just gone remotely as an example. My understanding is Newton is voting either tonight or tomorrow with a modification to go fully remote for their high schools. So districts that are finding themselves in that place have a necessary intersection with the DESE guidance to warrant the school committee to authorize any sports in that situation. But assuming that's not our case here, it would be seeking your authorization to go in one direction or another, and we'll work up the details and the specifics of the plan.
Okay, and one more question, which is that I'm presuming that fully remote students would have all the same opportunities to participate that, that they were comfortable with and their families were comfortable with, but that we would offer all the same athletic opportunities to fully remote students as hybrid students. Is that correct?
That for me, yes. That I just wanted to put that on the list to kind of make sure that we were putting it out there and that everyone was clear that participation would be allowed with the comfortability of the individual families.
Thank you. I'll go through this. I'll just see if there's anyone else, but I just have a quick question. The ones that were considered, so the football and the cheer, were they highlighted as being high risk because they're happening in the fall? So they were shifted. So something like wrestling is seemingly okay, or is it because it's a little bit later that they haven't made that decision yet?
No, and that's my fault. I wanted to color code them and I waited too long. But so currently, and you can see them on the EA guidelines, but football and cheer are considered to be high risk in the EA guidelines. Additionally, boys and girls hockey, boys and girls basketball, and wrestling are all considered to be high risk as well. So those will be voted on prior to the season starting. So they did leave them within their winter season, or the winter season for right now. But ultimately, it will be up to the MIA to vote whether we even have the option of deciding whether they'll go to the floating season or they will already be put there.
Great. Thank you. That's what I thought. That's helpful. Thank you. Can we move on? I'm just looking. I think we're good.
Great. Thank you, Mia.
Thank you.
Transportation is up next, and we are in the process, Lisa's here tonight, just to provide a little bit more information on also a very challenging aspect as it relates to planning for our reopening. Lisa?
Good evening, everyone. One of the things I wanted to discuss, some updates on our approach to DESE guidance. We have established a bus pass program. So last Thursday, emails went out to all families with a link to register for busing, and all students who are registered will be provided with a bus pass ID card that will be affixed to their backpacks. The purpose of the bus pass program is it will ensure our ridership never exceeds the maximum occupancy set forth in the guidance, which is a maximum of 25 students per bus or 1 student per seat. Students who have not been issued a pass will not be permitted to board the bus. So in the past, essentially when the bus stopped, especially at the older grades, you may have students coming and going using the transportation as their needs see fit throughout the course of the school year. But now we'll have very specific numbers on who's on our vehicles. We're not looking to limit ridership, limit the needs of the community. So we do intend to have provide service for the entire community who is looking for it. But it's just so we have exact numbers on our vehicles. It has been decided after careful thought that in regards to the monitors, we would not be able to provide them on the buses. There is currently an industry-wide staffing shortage, and employing monitors would be extremely challenging. Other districts have tried to hire their own and haven't received applications in some of the districts I've been talking to and working with. We are confident, though, with the lower ridership, distancing, and seating arrangements and a low tolerance policy on the vehicles, that we will be able to provide a safe ride to and from school. We will also use the camera systems on the buses to ensure the guidance is being followed. And lastly, hand sanitizer. The RMV did approve the use of hand sanitizer on the vehicles, so the students will be provided by the driver. So the driver will have some readily available for all the students on board. Next slide. Based on the August survey results, here's where we currently stand for ridership on our buses. So in the high school, we had 370 students requesting transportation. So we're on an average of 20 students per bus at the high school, 16 students per bus at the middle, 14 at the Woburn and North, Shawshene and West have 12, and the Wildwood and Boutwell buses are about 13 students each. So we're well within DESE guidelines for ridership. And the next one. And just in future considerations in transportation, although at the moment we are able to accommodate the community's needs in transportation, it is likely that in the near future we will have to reconsider the current policy and adhere to the school committee's guideline on walking distance and deny transportation service to students within a specific radius of their school. So any questions? That's all I have for transportation updates.
Much. Are there questions from the committee? I'm just scanning.
I do.
MJ, is that you?
Yes, sorry. Hi, thank you. I just, a quick question. In the planning for the transportation piece, are there any increase in the number of buses that we need or a change in schedules depending upon?
Sorry, go ahead. The number of buses hasn't changed. We're still using our fleet of 16. We will be adding 4 additional midday routes for the kindergartens with their with their half-day programs. It will be at a minimal cost, but essentially everything will be running as normal.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mr. Baxdale.
So the sanitizer, I think you said that the driver will have sanitizer for the students. How are the logistics of that going to work with students entering and leaving the bus and also keeping them separate and distant from the driver? I mean, is that literally that the driver holds out the sanitizer and squirts it on their hands? Or are we talking about that the driver will have sanitizer and it can be like, I don't know, mounted on a little thing like it is on the walls of buildings or doctor's offices?
Yeah.
How do we see that working?
So they will not be mounted in the vehicles. It's very challenging. The RMV, if you were to mount it, the RMV would have to come out and inspect. If everybody in the state is doing that, it's not going to happen by the time school starts. So mounting them is extremely challenging. I haven't really discussed the details of that with NRT, the bus company, in regards to if there's going to be kind of a squirt bottle in the cup holder or something to that effect for the students to use, or if the driver, yes, will just be pumping it into the students' hands. I'll have to get more information on that.
If someone else doesn't have something just yet, I just have a question about when there are concerns, as there are always concerns on a bus, will the drivers report directly to you? And I guess what do we see as being the is it no tolerance, zero tolerance, however it was?
It's a low tolerance policy. Students are students. They're children. They're going to play with their masks. But it's more of consistent issues with it, completely removing it, repeat offenders, in which case, yes, the driver will report it to the school and the school can notify me. And how it will be handled, I think a last resort would ever be to suspend bus privileges. It would be more of a, if I have to get on the vehicle and ride with them, just to be a presence, that's something we're willing to do, just to make sure we have a safe ride. And we can do routine monitoring of the vehicles with the camera systems.
And I'm assuming, Lisa, that students would not be allowed to enter the bus without a mask. That
is correct. They must wear a mask, and if for some reason they don't have one, a mask will be available for them to use.
And my last question, how will students learn about the protocols and sort of those expectations when you enter? I mean, are parents providing, who's providing this for students so they understand the rules and what happens when they don't follow the rules?
So when the bus registration email had gone out, it was briefly discussed in there within that email. And also when the bus passes are handed out and distributed to the families, it will be reiterated.
Thank you. MJ?
So I know overall, that's great with regards to the mask usage. What happens if we have a student who is medically compromised and falls into that criteria of where they are exempted from wearing a mask? How is that communicated to the bus driver? Do we have a system of communication that, you know, respects this child, you know, a child's privacy, you know, under FERPA, but still be able to use our transportation? I don't know if that has been considered, or if we have any students that fit that criteria currently signed up for busing privileges. I just wanted.
I haven't seen, based on summer transportation, we did do some special education out of district transportation, and we've actually, it's gone very smoothly. The students have been excellent. The parents have been excellent. It is on a very, very small scale. If there is, for medical reasons, a reason why a student can't wear a mask on a bus, they do have to provide documentation to the school, and then that school will just notify me to notify the driver as well.
That's perfect. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
All right. Yes, Mr. Ragsdale.
Will students have to be loaded onto the bus in order of their stops on the way home, just to minimize passing each other in the aisles? And if so, how much longer do we think that that's going to take to have students exit school? And
the schools will be provided with essentially a roster, so I will have the order in which the students should board available. I certainly think it may be a little bit more of a challenging feat at the middle school and high school level. I don't anticipate it to take considerably longer, given that we're only loading approximately about 15 students onto a bus. And they do come in staggered, well, not in the even in the afternoon, they do have more of a staggered approach. The middle school, I believe, is using 3 exit points to load the vehicles. So I'm not anticipating a huge delay when boarding.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'm looking, I don't see anybody else's hand. Okay, we're good. Thank you so much for being here.
We are just a couple of weeks away from the planned opening of school, and all of these topics, in addition to certainly this one, is an important one, and I think on no doubt on many of our parent guardians' minds. And so Mr. Hooper, George Hooper, is here. He's been working very closely with the district leadership team in planning for our reopening around cleaning and disinfecting, and really doing all of this on top of the enormous task that is in any typical year of readying schools for the opening. So I thought it would be insightful for members of the committee and the community, of course, to have a better understanding and sense of what our planning is specifically around cleaning and disinfecting. So with that, Mr. Hooper.
Good evening, everybody. As Superintendent Brand had stated, right now we're just, we've been working all summer doing our deep cleaning in the schools, trying to put our finishing touches to these buildings now, just trying to get them ready. And we're also loading up all the material supplies and everything that we're going to need throughout the school year. Throughout the school year, we're going to be doing our routine cleaning and disinfecting. That'll be done by the custodial staff at each building. It's going to be anything but routine this year. But this cleaning does include disinfecting all classrooms, which are desks, chairs, office, tables. We're going to be vacuuming and emptying the trash in all areas of the building. All my employees that work for the Public Buildings Department have been giving the proper PPE as recommended by the CDC. Over the summer, we've also been taking training. We've done different training throughout. We just completed one for Maya. All our bathrooms will be cleaned and disinfected at least daily, twice. This includes cleaning all high-touched areas, your sinks, your faucets, disinfecting some key spots that are throughout. we'll be wiping down using our disinfectants that we have in house. If we find that any bathroom throughout the day might be heavily used or unsanitary during the day after we clean, we will close it down and readdress it during the day. We figure we will hit these after our first round of heavy use. We'll go in and disinfect, and at the end of each day, we will go through and clean these out. Our custodians will be hitting all the high touch areas, doors, handles, push plates, dispensers throughout the day. You'll see them walking around with trigger sprayers and rags in their hand, just constantly hitting handrails and touching different spots. All trash receptacles will be emptied daily and new liners will be installed. You'll notice that throughout the school, there's a lot of hand sanitizer stations throughout. Every place you go, we have foaming hand sanitizers throughout, and each classroom will have one located when you come into the classroom. You also, any classroom that has a sink in it will have a soap dispenser supplied with foaming hand soap. All classrooms that are being used will be disinfected each night. The hand sanitizer that we have is USDA bio-based product that meets FDA, CDC guidelines for hand sanitizer. All our materials, we have our SDS sheets that are located in our custodial closets, and they're available upon request. Next slide. I think this is your slide, Dr. Fran.
Yeah, I think that there were a couple other slides that didn't make it in there. George, if you want to just...
I'll continue on. I'll continue on with what we have. One of the things that we have that we've been utilizing is we have it's called an Arsenal One dispensing system that we have in the schools. Each school is equipped with this. This dispensing system has a dilution ratio, so my staff doesn't have to worry about pouring in or mixing anything in particular. We have a Suprox, which is a hydrogen peroxide cleaner that we use daily when we go through and mop floors, take care of the bathrooms. This is a general purpose cleaner that we can use on carpets and window cleaning. It's a Green Seal certified. We also have a Rejuvenol product, which is a disinfectant cleaner. This is able to be used in a trigger sprayer. We can put it in a mop and bucket as we go through. It's an EPA registered disinfectant that we use. We also have a QT Plus, which is a hospital grade disinfectant. This here is a fungicide, a mildew stat. It's EPA registered. It can also be used in the trigger sprayer, but it's meant to be used on high touch spots. We'll go around and you'll see that my custodians will be using this. The hand sanitizers, stations that we have that are located throughout the school, it's a Betco alcohol-based foaming hand sanitizer. It meets FDA and CDC guidelines for hand sanitation. Soap dispensers located in bathrooms and classrooms that have sink. We have a foaming hand soap. This is also a, let's see, for hand sanitizing and cleaning. One of the big products that we have this year that we're using, my guys have been trained on, is a Victory electrostatic sprayer. This is a professional piece of equipment. We just purchased these. Each school has at least one. This product here that we put in it is a, let's see, BioEsk. It's a non-toxic, it's non-harsh, and it's able to kill COVID within 4 minutes. The electrostatic sprayer, when they put it in, can cover up to 23,000 square feet on a full tank. This here is going to be our main tool at nighttime that we're going to go through after the building is empty. It allows us to apply an even coat on surfaces. It applies the chemical faster, it uses less, and it's a more complete, consistent coverage throughout. that BioS chemical, that's a non-toxic solution that's used in this sprayer. It's food safe. It disinfects, sanitizes, and deodorizes all in one step. It's a ready-to-use formula. My guys don't have to mix it. They just pour it in. It's ready to go. It's non-abrasive, environmentally friendly, and it's an ideal for everyday use. It contains no chlorine, no bleach, no phosphates, or harsh chemicals. It's also EPA registered. My guys will be returning back to their normal hours on August 31st, when the building will be open from 6 o'clock in the morning till 10:30 at night, depending on which building that you are assigned to. Any questions?
I'm sure there are some. Are there questions from the committee?
I know it's a lot of information just kind of thrown out there.
I'm scanning.
Go ahead.
David.
Can you talk about our plans and abilities to properly clean the Boutwell and the Wildwood between the AM and PM cohorts every day?
Yeah, I've been working with the superintendent. We'll work with the school administration in that building as they go out. When they leave the classrooms, we'll be going in, dry mopping the floor, spraying down the sinks with our disinfectant, wiping down the high touch areas, going through that entire classroom there, and for each classroom.
Sorry, I'm waiting for a follow-up. David, any?
Okay, I'll do another if no one else has a question right now. So we're asking a lot more of the custodial staff now than we ever have before, for just very, very, thorough and frequent cleaning with a lot of new, products and chemicals and so forth. Have we hired any additional custodians? How? I guess we're asking a lot. If it's the same number of people, but we're asking so much more of them, how do we ensure that they're able to be properly supported in doing this extremely important work?
Well, we have discussed it. We have not hired additional personnel. Right now, with the openings, the way that we are approaching it, we're kind of on a wait and see, just to see how it goes. We're going to utilize our staff right now. We've discussed each one of these steps that we've gone through, and our approach is going to be that we're going to require some overtime to get these done, because some of this disinfecting and cleaning cannot be done while people are in the school building. So we will be doing this after hours when people have left the building and the building is vacant. That'll give us more time to do some of this.
Mr. Hooper, can I ask a question again,
Sure.
following up on David's question about the morning and afternoon kindergarten? Will teachers be asked to leave their space at that time? Is it okay for them to be in the room? I'm guessing, can they be in the space when it's being disinfected or no? I guess that's the question.
Depends on what we're going to be using. So different parts of the day. In the evening, when we use the electrostatic sprayer, there will be nobody in the building. We will go through the entire building at that time. In between cohorts, we will be using a trigger sprayer. So that is going to just be on the high touch areas. You'll see them go through with the rags. They'll be spraying it down. They leave it there for 4 or 5 minutes, wipe it off. That gives it a dwell time to kill it. And you will not have the same type of mist or in the environment that you would have with the electrostatic sprayer. So to your point, they will be able to be in the room. They'll be in the classroom. We'll be cleaning around them. We're going to be dry mopping the floor, emptying the trash, pulling out the container, and then moving on to the next classroom.
If I could, I'm in the Roman house every day, and the custodians come in every day with what Mr. Hooper just talked about with the a spray bottle, rag, and I sit in my office and they just clean the the doorknobs and what have you. So there's no issue. There's no smell. There's nothing.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Ruggiero. Other questions? I don't see any other on my screen, so I'm just going to flip through real fast.
Mr. Ragsdale.
Mr. Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
So you said the bathrooms are going to be cleaned at least twice a day.
Correct.
And there's a separately in one of the slides, it says that custodians will be disinfecting all touch surfaces like regularly through the day. And you talked about that we'll see them kind of just walking through the building, spraying everything. Does that include the bathrooms? In addition to their regular cleaning, that they will just be kind of regularly entered and have high touch surfaces sprayed down as well?
Throughout the day. I mean, because there is, depending on the building that you're in, the high school is almost 200,000 square feet. So they'll be monitoring those and they'll be walking throughout. And of course, if something's been picked up, that's why I said if a bathroom for some reason is unsanitary after it's already been cleaned, at that point, they would address it with the principal or administration of the building. They may even have to lock that bathroom until they can get into it and address it.
Okay. And are we planning to keep the cohort separate on the basis of bathrooms? Are we going to have cohort A bathrooms and cohort B bathrooms, or are they going to be mixing in the bathrooms?
That would not be my call.
Yeah, that's more of an operational question for Dr.
Yes,
Brand.
I don't know, but you mean mixing cohorts between A and B days? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, no, I suppose I'm not thinking that all the way through, because they're going to be in the building on separate days, so that everyone in the building on one day is the same cohort.
And there certainly would not be ideally, I suppose, we would have the same bathrooms assigned to each cohort, but that wouldn't be possible. We have limitations for certainly just the numbers available. So.
Okay, yeah, no, I for some reason hadn't thought that all the way through. One more question about the building. So how often do we intend to do a deep cleaning of each building that goes beyond just kind of like our daily and weekly procedures?
Well, I think there's a little misconception on the deep cleaning. We do a deep cleaning over the summertime. That's when we pull everything out. Everything gets pulled right out of the classroom. We strip the floors down, the walls get washed, and then we put a new coat of finish on there. The furniture is all washed, and then everything's pushed back into the room. That is quite an undertaking. We will be going through cleaning and disinfecting every room every night. So when I talk about this backpack, you may have seen it. I know there was a picture of it. That's the one that the MBTA has been using to do their trains. This is the one that's been it's been on the news for quite a few different organizations that are out there that have it. It is highly sought right now. It's not an easy one to obtain, but we actually have these throughout our district. So these will be used every night when we go through it. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think that a lot of people throw around the word deep cleaning and it doesn't have a fixed meaning. And clearly what you described is a once a year thing when everyone's out of the building.
Right.
So
we do a little more thorough cleaning over breaks when we have the time when we could pull things out and do some of the scrubbing of the floors and that. But deep cleaning is usually done over the summertime when we have some breaks.
Mr. Huber, while you're here, could you just briefly update the committee on the HVAC assessment?
Yeah, now typically in what we have done over the summer, we've gone through all our HVAC equipment, my building systems manager, my HVAC technician, and our electricians. We go on the rooftop units throughout, and we also do the unit ventilators and the air handlers in the building. And when I say we go through them, they vacuum them out, they change the filters, they change the belts, they check the operation and make sure everything's going. This year is a little bit different. We've been working with a third-party engineering firm that's going through and assessing our buildings. And one of the, through the guidelines that we've seen is we're providing a lot more outside air, fresh air. So we're opening outside dampers and enabling our units to bring in more outside air. We've walked through, my building systems guy and our third-party engineer, all of our schools. They're still putting together the reports and the evaluations, and I'm waiting to hear back on those. But we've completed our go through of all the equipment and everything in the buildings over the summer. We are completed our end. We're just waiting to hear some recommendations from our third-party engineer.
Thank you, Mr. Hooper.
And so just quickly, have they been through, like, are they going classroom by classroom? They've been in like every room to
What they do
independently
is,
evaluate each room?
They go to the building, they'll assess the building. They first, you look at the age and the type of system that's in the building. Of course, the Wildwood 1954, 55 construction doesn't compare to our high school. That's an old univentilator system with an exhaust. Not a lot of bells and whistles with that. So they will go in, they will look at the system that's there. They'll open a few of them up, check them. They won't go into every single one of them because they're typical. They're typical. My guys, when we go through it, we go through every single one. So that building there, once they go through, they see what's there, they'll make some recommendations. They look for certain air exchanges, size of the equipment that's there, make sure the exhaust is working, and that it's pulling outside air.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Quick update on PP&E. There's a couple more slides on this update. This reflects all of the respective PP&E that has been ordered. The column in the middle, outstanding, means that those items have not been delivered or received, if you will. Partial, as you can see with the wipes. But Mr. Ruggiero and his support have been working endlessly at tracking these things down, placing orders, and working with the respective companies to get these in line. Paul, do you want to add anything to this at all?
No, I think you said it. I mean, we essentially have all the products that we'd order with the exception of the wipes. We just ordered last week about 1,100 tubs of wipes, and a combination of tubs and refills for tubs that we've already ordered. So there's enough to go around right now, and we expect to get those back. We did have to buy some cots, pillows, pillow covers, privacy screens. They're more for the medical waiting rooms, if you will. So we're tracking down the ETA for those, if you will. We've also been working closely with George, kind of a collaborative effort. With public buildings, buying some of the, you might not see a lot of hand soap or hand sanitizer here, but that would have been purchased through public buildings. So we're in good shape. We're actually moving this stuff out to school, some of this stuff out to schools this week. Other stuff will work with student support services on certain of the other PP items for staff that may need more protection than other staff. So we're working in collaboration. What's not shown on here, we do have signage as well for the walls. We work with Ms. Crow coming up with what type of signage we should have for each school, and that will be going out to the schools sometime this week as well.
Thank you.
The plans are underway to pull together a district-wide COVID planning team, district-wide. Each building has up and running a building-based planning team. Think of that as somewhat of a, like it may have been the case or is the case for safety and security, but there's also with intention to pull together a team that has representation from each school, as well as some other key roles that you can see here. This is not a specific DESE guidance requirement, at least as far as I can recollect, but certainly I think something that will be important to help guide our planning, continually monitor and make recommendations for revisions to our protocols or standards that we're going to be obviously having to work within over the next number of weeks, months, and undoubtedly probably this school year, it would seem. All of this work, and I do trust and hope that the community has a sense of these are a lot of individuals you heard from tonight. This is reflective of really what just scratches the surface for the mountain of work that is ongoing daily, literally every single day of the week, to try and make sure that things are in place for our reopening. That said, we have staff that are returning to work on August the 31st. This was always the first day planned for staff, and this was reflective in the calendar that you approved way back before all of this unfolded. We have 10 professional days that have been given to us and given to all districts by the Department of Education, the Commissioner, specifically for training and professional development. I sent out a notice to all of our staff today around preparing them for what that is to look like. We're still finalizing the schedule with so many moving parts. There's a lot of time here to meaningfully fill, but I would share with the committee that there are 5 overarching areas that I believe firmly our plan will address and prioritize: health, safety, and well-being, walking staff through the opportunity to address the overall needs of all students, including specific time on SEL, trauma, and more broadly, individual needs of students. Certainly curriculum planning time to support hybrid and remote learning, which we, of course, as we all know well, did not have in the spring. Our teachers will have that time over the span of the 10 days. Re-engagement of school staff. It's not lost upon me that obviously when all of this came to the halt, staff have not been together except remotely, and while that will largely be the case beginning of the next week of these 10 days, we're looking forward to staff returning, obviously though in a very modified and different way. And also opportunities for staff to receive training and professional development to expand their knowledge around a numerous number of platforms, technological platforms. And Mr. Lord has been doing some great work in pulling together to make sure that teachers have the awareness and understanding about how best to utilize technology and leverage that in a very meaningful and rich way to support their teaching and our student learning. We're working to also bring in Dr. Robert Brooks. I'm not sure why that next bullet's there. I'm sorry about that. But the last piece, Dr. Robert Brooks, who is a fairly well-known speaker, member of the Harvard Medical School, and has written, I think, 18 or 20 books and delivered many talks and webinars to not just educators, but beyond. And we're excited to have Dr. Brooks be in the district to give a key address around resiliency for students and staff that will help kick off our year. So there's still a number of next steps that have to unfold. I mentioned at the outset, negotiations, HVAC assessment results, still a very critical area. Bullet number 3, determining staff availability. We have an awful lot of work still to do around that. We're going to work as feverishly as we can, but that's a key piece to this. Monitoring, obviously, the related metrics that were and have been shared at the outset, and continuing to refine and develop our plans around hybrid. As you know, that this is a complex picture. These last bullets are ones that I pointed to in the last presentation to you, things that may interfere with our ability to reopen for students and staff. And I just want to remind the community of these because these have not changed. We've made some mention of the HVAC assessment results, PPE and availability. We're in very good shape with that, thanks to Paul's efforts, and so those are coming in. That's not a concern. The metrics, obviously, we have to continue to monitor those. Direction by state agencies, staffing levels, as I mentioned, negotiations, and scheduling logistics. It would be a lost opportunity to share with folks that these are coming together, as difficult as it is at the elementary level, a little more complicated at the middle school level, immensely complicated at the high school level. Linda and her team have been working hours to try and figure this out. And I would suggest to you that while there may be other overarching reasons why we're starting to see some high schools pivot to fully remote, I'm beginning to think that part of that may be inherent in the logistics. And the more and more that I know her team is thinking about that. I mentioned at the outset that we have very few students who have indicated that they want to go fully remote. We also have a very strong feedback from parents and guardians that they are looking for Wilmington High School teachers to teach their children. There is a tension with that to try and figure out how to schedule for that. With the necessary requirement to attend to students in person, there's limitations just generally around staffing. We know for a fact that there are other high schools that are pursuing third parties to deliver instructional programming. We are not set in that direction right now, and Linda and her team are trying to figure that out and make that work. But it would be a lost opportunity to share with you that this is a puzzle that right now is struggling to come together. So I have the full confidence that they're going to continue to work at that, but I do want to share with the committee that this is particularly the high school level, some immense challenges. If we want to try and provide a full scope of courses that students have selected and deliver those with high school teachers from Wilmington, there are some limitations that they're discovering. So I put that out there now. I'm not saying anything more than that there's a struggle here. I will keep you updated in the community, but I do need to share this. This is a real difficult part of this work that Linda and her team is dealing with. So that I know was a super long presentation with an awful lot of parts to share. We will post this information on the website and just for the committee to know that we continue to march forward and trying to tend to all of these various parts the best that we can. And with that, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Dr. Brand, with the challenges with the high school scheduling, could you not give a specific example that we have? Could you sort of break that down a little bit for the community, just so that they can understand what I think I can envision what you're referring to? So if someone specifically teaches physics, for example, or whatever it may be.
Right, sure. And perhaps that is a good, yes.
Why would it look different at the mid? I can understand why it would look different at the middle school, but if you could just explain that, I think that would be helpful.
In terms of that challenge, you mean? Sure. Right. So let's just say that there are 2 physics teachers. I'm not sure the exact number. Well, let's just say hypothetically there are 2 physics teachers, and with the respective student load of those students who have selected physics and who are in the hybrid model, those 2 teachers might be fully required to deliver physics to the students that have opted to be in person in the hybrid model. But there could be a complement of 12 kids, let's say, or 18 kids or 15 kids that also want physics, but have indicated that they want to go fully remote. We don't have a physics teacher necessarily to deliver that instruction. And so that's the tension. And the same could hold true in probably most, if not all, of the subject areas. A hypothetical that you see at the elementary level, or not, that's not a hypothetical, but to stay with the high school, the ability for us to, if we were to have 4 third grade classes, 4 teachers, but the equivalent of a whole class opted to go fully remote, we can obviously repurpose a teacher, one of those 4, and dedicate his or her time to deliver instruction for those complement of kids. That doesn't work that way, particularly at the high school. And so that's the challenge.
Thank you. Other questions, comments from the committee? David.
Is it fair to say that at the elementary level, and then at least at the middle school though, based on what we're sort of both seeing from the survey results and just the planning up to now, that it looks promising for delivering remote instruction with Wilmington teachers in those situations?
I think that, yes, the level of ability to work with, but again, I point out there that we are still working through ascertaining exactly which staff we have. but making the assumption that we will have sufficient staff for in-person delivery, the confidence is much higher that we're going to be able to structure and schedule those at the elementary and the middle school level. We're still a little ways away from that from the high school, but we'll obviously keep everyone posted. Determining the staffing is a key piece, of course, though.
Other questions for Dr. Brand? Go ahead, David.
And knowing that this is incredibly dependent on staffing and all the other moving pieces, do we have a sense of the time frame within which families can expect to receive their cohort assignments?
So yes, thank you for reminding me. My apologies. So the cohort assignments will go out next week to families. It's quite possible that they don't necessarily go out with staff. We're going to try and hopefully not have that to be the case, but we recognize that families are eager to know which cohorts or which cohorts they're in so that they can plan their schedules. And so my conversations with principals yesterday was collectively the assurance from them that they would be ready, and we will push out that information next week to families in a very coordinated way, so it's all coming out at the same time. If we can pair that with teachers, of course we will. I can't make that promise right now, but certainly the promise that we'll get the cohorts assignments out next week.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Brand.
Thank you.
So I think if it's okay, and Dr. Brand, let me know if this will cause any issues, but B, C, and D we're not quite ready for anyhow, but B and C, is it okay to move that to our next meeting, or is that timely?
Paul, that permanent building committee, do you know the date on that, when they're planning to have that first meeting?
That's okay. Mr. Agier, if you want to look for that, if we could, we do need to review the policy. So why don't we move to that?
Yeah.
If that's okay.
That
and
would
then,
be great. Please, thank you.
okay. All right, so we'll pull up the mask policy. All right, so we are looking at face coverings. And you'll notice that there are already some track changes. David, do you want to just talk us through that real fast?
Sure. So these are just the three comments that I had looking through the policy that I wanted to bring up here at the meeting. One, whether we wanted to be at all specific about the kinds of mask coverings, or just leave that completely up to to parents to choose whatever they want, if they want over ear or if they want neck gaiters, if they whatever they want. That's, I thought, one thing that's that was worth looking at. Secondly, because this is a model policy, it says that exempted from the mask policy are students in grades 1 and below. Given that that is not the choice that we've made in Wilmington, that we're extending it all the way down, it seems that that should not remain as it is, that should reflect in some way our policy, either by stating it outright that essentially there are no exemptions other than the medical and so forth, behavioral, or it could just simply be that that we put that into the discretion of the superintendent to extend or not extend. And then the last comment I had to do with for children who don't wear masks, something approved by the building principal in consultation with the school nurse or local board of health. It just seemed to me that if it's getting to the issue of consulting with the board of health, that we would want more than just the school involved, that we would want at least Ms. Crow or Dr. Brand involved at that point, if we're considering consultation with the local board of health. For those are my three comments, and I welcome anyone's thoughts.
Thank you, David. MJ.
So I sorry about that. So I agree in large part with what David said, and take into consideration where neck gaiters alone are not really sufficient or as forgive me, I'm slowing down mentally, as effective as like medical masks or 2-3 ply cloth masks. I know there are a lot of kids like the neck gaiters, and I know that there are neck gaiters where you can actually add filters in them for that extra layer of protection. I offer that as a possible modification for consideration. I would also like to separate the pre-K and kindergarten mask wearing from the grades 1 through 12. There's language that the DESE and the Department of Public Health in their joint memo language referenced. I do think that we, I am in support of Dr. Brand's initial, wanting it to go right down to pre-K. Again, I think that age bracket offers a whole host of different challenges. I don't have the joint memo language right in front of me, of which I wanted to reference. Give me just a moment. I think it was shared with us. Whenever possible, students in pre-K and kindergarten, as we could reference in this policy, and who can safely and appropriately wear, remove and handle masks, should wear so. Again, it goes to that age bracket and that type of language. If we can kind of modify it with that type of language that that joint memo reference, I think that may be more. I don't know if that makes for a more successful policy. But I'm just throwing that out to you as an addition to Dave's remarks.
So here in David's comment, it says, or at the superintendent's discretion. I mean, if we did that, does it sort of leave it open enough so that we can refer back to that, but at the same time, ultimately he makes the decision? Dr. Brand, do you have a thought on that? Does it?
I'm sorry, Jen, just for clarification, you mean regarding the pre-K to kindergarten masks?
Yeah.
Well, what happens, I guess it's teachers and building administrators who may encounter that first before the superintendent per se.
No, right. I mean, who's wearing it. Instead of saying it has, that Dr. Brand would state that separately from this policy in a sense.
I see. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
That's okay.
Sorry, so is your question still there? I agree with that. I think that's fine.
Okay. All right, so there's a couple of things here. And so do you need us to vote on this tonight?
No, I thank you for the clarification. It truly is here as would any other policy for your consideration. And indeed true, normally it would come through the policy subcommittee, but given the nature of how these things are unfolding right now, I'm recommending that you consider this as a first read, and that it's entirely fine, I think, to bring it back to your next meeting and have you vote to approve if you're so inclined.
Okay. So if this is the first read, we need to agree on, for example, the Gators. Do we want to put anything in there? Dr. Brand, do you have a preference on that?
It would seem to me that given the recent evolution of the Gators, that probably should be modified.
Okay. And sorry, Joe, do you have your hand up?
I'm just curious on the face mask. Do we want to talk with, say, either Doreen or Shelley Newhouse on what they deem appropriate, considering they're the medical experts versus the rest of us who are not?
Yes, that's right. I'd be happy, if you'd like, I'd be happy to take this back and just get any further thoughts or comments, and then share those with you. when this comes back to you.
Great.
I think if we can just talk with them and add those additional track changes. So if they decide that the Gators are not going to be acceptable, then we should get that in there now so that it goes out to families and they're aware of it. I think the same thing, I don't disagree with MJ's thoughts on using that joint Department of Health. I think that's actually not a bad idea to include that language, but I would definitely check with Doreen to see if that's going to make things more complicated. And then finally, at the bottom, I don't disagree with David's comment, building principal in consultation with the school nurse or local board of health. I just don't want to create, I don't want there to be, I'm just thinking, is there going to be this, is it a timing thing? Is it going to hold something up if everything's going back to Doreen? But I don't think it's a bad idea to just include the director of nursing. Thoughts on that? Joe?
I mean, I think each building nurse works well with Doreen. They talk quite a bit and they're trained. And so I would be comfortable with the school nurse being the person. And if they need to consult with Doreen, so be it. But I believe every school nurse is well trained and can be the decision maker. And that way we don't have to have Doreen running through millions of questions, and it can be handled at the building.
Other thoughts? Thank you, Joe. David?
I mean, just kind of thinking through what Joe just said, honestly, I think we could probably take out the local board of health. I mean, it's hard to, if it's truly down on a student level of some kind of, medical or emotional exception to the ability to wear a mask, I'm really not sure what the board of health has their expertise, but I'm not sure what they're going to contribute that our own nursing staff and building leaders are not going to be able to do in this situation.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Brand, you agree, disagree?
I do, that's fine. I would agree.
All right, so Mrs. Dixie, if we could just remove the local board of health, and then we'll gather some more information from Doreen and Shelley before our next meeting, and then hopefully bring this back for a second read. Is that good to move on? Okay, and then there's the student health and safety, wearing of masks, face coverings. Anything there you'd like to discuss? It looks good. Okay, looks good. All right, so we'll see.
I'm sorry, what were we going back to? I'm sorry.
No, I was scrolling down. So if you keep going, it says student health and safety, wearing of masks, face coverings.
Oh, I got it. Okay. Face coverings.
It's the sample handbook language.
Is that the one with David's comments to the right?
No, it's got some highlighted yellow.
Uh-huh. Sorry. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Appreciate it.
Okay, and will we be approving this as well, Dr. Brand?
Yes, I would suggest you should.
All right, so if there's no other questions or comments on that, that will come back for a second read September 9th.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. All right, and so Paul, we can skip C?
Yes, see, you can skip. The town manager would like some notification or identification by the week of the 14th, so we can do it the 9th. That's fine.
Okay. And just quickly, so people can think on it, can you just share what that is exactly?
Sure. Do you want me to, Glenn?
I've got it here. I can. So the request is to have a representative from the school committee to be a part of the Permanent Public Building Committee, correct? Right, Paul, for the selection of the OPM. And this is for the building construction renovation exploration of the joint school administration and town building. So it'll be a 5-person committee. George Hooper will chair that committee. The finance committee is going to have a designee on that, as well as looking for a school committee member as well.
and if I may, this piece here is for a particular group to review proposals for an owner's project manager, rate them, interview a short list, and then make a recommendation to the town manager for the hiring of an OPM for this project. So that's what this initial phase is, if you will.
Great. All right, so think on that, and if anyone has an intense interest in doing that, then please feel free to email Tristan or Glenn. Okay. All right. Next, we have subcommittee reports. I'm guessing there are none. Great. And then we have the subcommittee reorganization. I know we have skipped over this quite a few times. I do feel like we need to quickly go through it, and I apologize. I know it's late. But I think if we could just quickly, sorry, MJ. Yep. Wait, you're on mute.
I'm trying to get there, sorry. Were we going to address the SEAM reappointment of Dr. Brand to that?
We are going to hold on that because it's not, we can wait till September 9th to do that.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
It doesn't usually take that long, so that's why I asked.
Thank you. Please, now I hear you. I think earlier I read the same thing twice because I was so confused. So, all right. So if you can quickly pull up the subcommittees, it is not in your regular packet, but it's on it's under the electronic packet. So it's not in 826, but it is in your electronic packet. And I guess basically you've had some time to think on this. We've put this on hold quite a few times. So as we move down, if someone else if you're interested in serving on this committee or you no longer can serve on this committee, that's what we need to know. So first is the policy subcommittee. This committee reviews the policies, changes, updates, et cetera. They've been very, very busy, really even through the school closure, but has taken a little bit of a break over the summer, hoping to get right back into those policies in the fall. And so right now it is David Ragsdale, Jesse Fennelly, myself, and MJ Burns is an alternate. I'm happy to relinquish my participation if someone else is interested in joining this policy subcommittee. But if there is no one, I will continue on. I will just ask one of the other members to take on the role of, I'm not going to say chair, but organizer, because it's too much to chair multiple things. So we can talk about that in our first meeting in the fall. No changes here?
I'm willing to continue.
Okay.
If no one else wants to join.
Yeah, same.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much. Okay. Next, we have Sick Bank Subcommittee, Steve and Joe. You're good? You want to, Steve, you're still on the phone. I mean, you can still talk, I think. So Steve is,
can you hear
yes,
me?
we can. Steve has been on my speaker on my phone the entire meeting.
Because I didn't think my volume was coming through.
No, you're here. Well, I did tell you.
I have a lot to say.
No.
I'm good with Sick Bank.
Okay. Thank you. Joe, are you okay?
I'm good.
Great. Superintendent Evaluation Subcommittee. That was Joe, Jay, myself. Who is interested in that one? Well, this is really not quite as exciting as I was hoping it would. I think I probably should stay for this next evaluation as the chair, but if anyone else is interested in joining, please speak now or forever hold your peace. All right, so Joe and Jay, are you okay to stay?
Yeah.
All right, no one else is anxious to get in there. Okay. All right. We have school committee representative to the WEF Board of Directors. It is currently Jesse Fennelly. Jesse, are you enjoying that work? Would you like to stay on?
I'm happy to stay on unless somebody is dying to get in there. It's a great group, so I have no objection to staying as part of that.
Okay, we're gonna let you stay for another year. Congratulations. We have school committee representative to the WPS Wellness Advisory Committee. That is MJ Burns.
I'm willing to continue if anybody, unless anybody else would like to like to do it. Another great group to work with.
All right, looks good. Thank you, MJ. Congratulations. We have school committee representative to CPAC. That is currently David.
I've done that for 2 years now, and if someone else wants a chance to see the workings of CPAC, it's always a great group of people. I'm happy to step aside, but willing to continue if no one else wants to.
And when are those meetings typically, David?
They are typically on, well, they have been typically, it's hard to say what they'll be going forward, but they have typically been once a month on, I think on maybe I forget, like the first or third Thursday. So they were, I think, usually at about 6:30 p.m. once a month on a weeknight. Not a Wednesday night, of course.
Of course. My teacher wait time.
Wait, what are the guidelines on those of us with kids with IEPs with being on that subcommittee?
MJ?
Because I had consulted Andy. I was the representative back when I got on to the board. It was because you're also a parent with, in the same juncture. He said that it's it can be a very gray line and may have a potential of being a conflict of interest. But I would strongly urge you to revisit that with him again. That was about 6 or 7 years ago for me. So I would see if you could chat with him and get his opinion, or even MASC. They may also have a good guidance with regards to that.
Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, if David still wants it, I definitely know the inner workings of the CPAC. So,
I mean, given the role of the school committee member as just a liaison who kind of just brings news of the school committee there and takes news from CPAC back, we don't vote there. We don't really, argue in any way. I would think that in actuality, there's no real conflict because you're just basically there to liaise between the two committees.
But you're a parent. You automatically are a member of the CPAC just because your child is on an IEP, whether or not you participate in that discussion or not. So that's where the conflict arises with a school committee member whose children are on IEPs. That it's you know what I mean. That's where the warning was issued in that respect.
Yes, all parents of IEP, kids with IEPs are in the CPAC. Many of them probably don't realize that they were part of CPAC all along and didn't even know it. But if there's no conflict, I'd be happy to cede it to Joe for the year.
Okay, I mean, we can definitely look into it. Definitely an interest, but if there's a conflict, okay.
So we'll do a little research there. Thank you. And then we have the school committee executive session. I will stay in that role. School committee legislative representatives. We have MJ and Jesse. Yep, fine, okay. School committee handbook protocol. That looks fine. Is that okay? So that's me, MJ and David, unless someone else would like to get in there.
I'd be willing to step down if somebody wants to pick it up. Otherwise I'm happy. I like the team that I'm working with, but
I mean, it's similar in some ways to Paul. It's quite a bit. It's quite a bit to go through. But I'm happy to stay on. If MJ and Dave, if you'd like to stay on, that's fine. Okay. What do we need this one? Contract negotiation team. Yep. Is this accurate, Paul, with cafeteria employees?
No, you have, yeah, it's for cafeteria association. Should be in Jen, you and Joe.
Yep. So that's that. Yep.
And we don't need the educational assistants.
That's not on here though?
No, that's, I don't see, the educational assistants can come off.
Okay, it's not here.
Cafeteria association, and it'd be you and Joe.
Yep. Town Master Facilities Plan Committee representative, that is Steve. Is that still a thing?
I don't believe that is a thing anymore.
Happy to continue to serve on that.
Well, that seems so closely aligned to that new committee person.
Replace it.
Right. I wonder if you should just do that instead.
I want to know about the time commitment, but I would absolutely consider that. I do have some interest in that.
All right, so we'll send you that information like tomorrow. All right. School committee family communication relations. That is Joe, Jay, myself, and MJ. Anyone would like to take that on? That's fine. I will definitely step back. Okay. Wish we had like some like effects, like crickets or something. Would be like, you know, we could just play something in the background. And then finally, and I'm most exciting, we have the new equity subcommittee. It does not have a description yet because we're hoping that the subcommittee will design that. And that's the work based on the anti-racism resolution that we adopted, which is in your packets again for reference tonight. And so who is interested in serving on that committee? Mr. Samaha, I know you shared some interest. Mr. Ragsdale, great. And I would be very interested in serving on that committee as well. So I would be very interested in serving on that committee. I do not want to be chair of that committee. So I think at the first meeting, we have to appoint someone, but if someone could sort of take on that role now to say, I will organize it, that would be great. I don't know, Jay or David, if you would like to just be in charge of organizing it. You can email me, text me, just let me know. I think it's tricky when you have these subcommittees. There needs to be the person who organizes the meetings or they don't necessarily happen. So just being realistic with the other time commitments for school committee right now. All right, and I think that is it. And so, correspondence.
None this evening.
Okay. And then our future school committee dates, we have September 9th, 7 p.m. I think we agreed. We couldn't hear Steve, but I think we agreed to try and meet in person. So Steve, now that we can hear you, is that okay with you?
I would very much like to start meeting again.
Yep. Cool. Our meeting after that is September 23rd at 7 p.m. We will send out logistics about what this will look like. We will obviously need to wear masks, and we'll have to make sure we work on the design and talk with George Cooper and the custodians to see what sort of a task this is for them, and of course WCPB. Anything else before we adjourn? No?
Nope.
Thank you, Wilmington. Thank you everyone for being here. Thanks for your participation. And is there a motion to adjourn? MJ?
So moved.
No crickets now. Seconded by Mr. Samaha. All in favor? That is unanimous. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you, everybody.